Hello, hello, hello. It's day 3, you guys. How cool is this? 3 days of sharing knowledge with one another, of collaborating, of learning and growing and being creative together. This is so cool. Thank you to everyone who's been a part of this. Thank you everyone watching on our live stream. Appreciate you all for being here. This has been incredible. Day 3, we are going out with a bang today. We have some awesome presentations in store for you today, as well as an exceptionally, just the icing on the cake on day 3, you guys. It's a little silly, it's a little fun. We're going to be doing our Davinci Resolve Battle Royale later today. I can't wait for this. If you've seen Iron Chef, it's a very similar experience like that. This event is brought to us by Action VFX, NVIDIA Studio, and our friends at ASUS, providing us with all these awesome laptops over here that are just tricked out. And of course, ResolveCon as a whole wouldn't have been made possible without the wonderful support of our sponsors. Thank you, Blackmagic Design. Thank you, Puget Systems, NVIDIA Studio, Motion VFX, ASUS, Audio, Mammo World, Audio Design Desk, Action VFX, and Nobe Omniscope. There are lots of links in the description of this video down below if you are interested in any of those wonderful brands. And we're gonna get right into it. So guys, put your hands together for our first presenter of the day, the one and only Kevin Stratford.
Hey, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Excellent. You know, I wasn't sure how many people were going to show up this morning after the party last night, so it's good to see a full room here. That's great. So we're gonna do something really fun tonight, or this afternoon, whatever time it happens to be for all the people streaming. But we're pulling together a vertical video. So think TikTok or Instagram Reels or Facebook Reels. We're gonna pull one of those together. And one of the exciting things about this is usually when I pull together this type of content, it's me sitting in front of my camera. So it's really cool to be able to see face-to-face here and interact with all of you here. Before we jump into pulling together a vertical video, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on who I even am up here. So like Dan said, my name is Kevin Stratford, and I work as a full-time content creator, which is crazy because I think back to when I went to school and graduated. That wasn't even a job that existed. So this is a completely new profession that has emerged. So it's just kind of an exciting space to see how these new jobs come about. In a previous life, before working on content creation, I worked as a product manager at Microsoft. And so you might wonder, well, how did this guy get over to video editing and working on YouTube videos? So when I was at Microsoft, what was really interesting is I worked as a product manager. So we built Microsoft Office and these different products. And as part of that, one of the really key components of building products is to talk to your customers and to understand what their needs are. We would get all types of feedback coming in. I mean, imagine like Casey and crew getting feedback on the courses. Microsoft is just a fire hose of hundreds of thousands of comments every single day, just a ton of feedback. And a lot of it, you know, people request new features and you're like, okay, that doesn't exist. That's something we should build into the product. It goes on the backlog, goes on the roadmap, and you build it in. But then there was also quite a bit of feedback. People asking, hey, you should add this feature into, say, Excel or into Word or into PowerPoint. But then you go into the product, and it turns out that feature is already in the product. And so it's not an issue of like, hey, this is something you should build. It's just that the awareness isn't there. And I'm sure all of us can relate to this with Davinci Resolve. When you look at Davinci Resolve, half the time I'm like, oh, I'd love to do this. I wish they had that feature. It turns out the feature's there. So the same thing happens. I think all software, the more functionality it gets, the more complicated it gets. People just don't know about all of the richness and all of the capabilities that exist in that application. So what happened is, people would ask for these things, and I was like, hey, it's an awareness issue. Let me pull together a video that educates and lets people know that this rich functionality is already in the product. And so then I uploaded it to YouTube, and people watched it. They enjoyed it, and they said, hey, can you show us more? Can you do a video on this topic or that topic? And so I started getting more and more videos out there, and as people requested things, my video backlog just kept growing and growing and growing. I have this massive list of thousands of items. And yeah, so it resonated and kept growing and kept growing. And at a certain point, I said, hey, there is a lot of demand for this. And what blew my mind, and what's so interesting about the online video space, I'm working on Microsoft, and I'm getting 100,000 people to watch every single day, which is just mind-blowing. And it just felt that there was a big opportunity to have an impact and really help people learn how to use technology better. So that kind of led me to the decision of, hey, let me leave Microsoft, and I'm going to work on content creation full-time. And so that was 3 years ago, and it's been a fun ride. So today, I mentioned that we're going to work on a vertical video. How many people here have pulled together a vertical video or a reel or a TikTok before? Can I see a show of hands? Nice. Actually, a fair number of people have done it before. How did you like the experience? Is it something you enjoy? Not so much? I was wondering what the response would be with this type of audience for this demographic. It's a pain in the ass. So one of the really interesting things about vertical videos, in the past, if you say pull together a video for YouTube, it's 16 by 9. In terms of the number of services that you could upload a video like that to, it's pretty limited, right? You have YouTube, maybe Vimeo, but that's you're not going to get as big of an audience. So you didn't really have too many places where you could place your content. The really neat thing about vertical video is you can create one video, and then you have all of these different platforms where you can place your video. So you could upload it to TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and I guess X, previously known as Twitter. But you could basically make one video and you can put it on all these different platforms, which is pretty exciting. So you get massive, massive reach with just one effort in making a video. Now, one thing that blew my mind, so as I was kind of pulling together, hey, what am I going to talk about today for this presentation, I started looking at stats. And for those of you who haven't pulled together TikTok or Instagram videos before, this may change your mind and may kind of push you down the path of experimenting with it. So when you look just at TikTok, I think in the United States, we have 330 million something people living in this country. About 100 million people use TikTok. So it's almost about a third of the population is going on to TikTok to consume content. And this is the stat that just, like I still can't believe it. But when you look at the average amount of time that a TikTok user in the US spends on the service, any guesses for how much time people spend per day on TikTok?
10 hours?
Not quite that long. So it does, yeah. It turns out it's about, I think the actual stat is like 56 minutes and 22 seconds. So almost an hour of time every single day is going into TikTok. Now, as a fun thought experiment, I said, okay, so if people are spending about an hour every single day on TikTok, over the course of someone's life, how much time is that? It turns out it's a little over 2 years of time on TikTok. Like, that blows my mind. I don't know if when I'm an old man, I'd want to say, oh, I spent 2 years of my life on TikTok. And the interesting thing is, like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I think when you look at TikTok, you have all sorts of different types of content, right? You have entertainment content. You have people dancing. But I think one of the neat things, too, is you also have educational content. And that's one of the things I focus on. So I'm an educational content creator. I want to empower people to be able to use technology better so they can accomplish more at work, accomplish more at school. And so I place educational videos on these different services. So you go to TikTok, maybe you're waiting in line for lunch, you have a minute before it's your turn, and you want to learn something quickly, we'll pull out your phone, you get a quick tip, you're like, okay, now I learned how to do something. So that's kind of what my channel and what my shorts are all about. And today, what's neat is we're going to pull together a vertical video that I used on my channel. And the thing that's interesting is this video went on to get, I think it was almost 2 million people watched it. So just kind of mind-boggling how many people that works out to be. Right? You see the numbers on the screen, but then when you actually see the faces, you're like, well, that's a lot of stadiums worth of people watching a video. And we're going to take a quick preview of the video. And one thing, so at the bottom of the stream in the description, we have a link to all the sample files. So if you want to follow along today and actually make your own short, you could do that. So I'm going to play a preview, and if you want to get the sample files, you could do that. So let me pull up the preview here.
website.
All right.
You can turn your drawings into animations. Go to the following website. Then upload a picture of your drawing. Select your character and make sure that the background's removed. Then confirm all of the different joints. Then you can choose your animation. And look at that, my little man is dancing. That's adorable.
So yeah, that's the thing. So with this short video, it's really interesting because it's like if you look at the timestamp there, it's a 21-second video. But it's amazing how much work goes into building a 20-second video. And we're going to go through all the steps of making this happen and pulling it together. And it's going to be fun. We're going to use the edit page. We're going to use the Fusion page. We're going to use the Fairlight page. So we're going to use a few of the different interfaces within Davinci Resolve to make this happen. Just a few little things, kind of fun little tidbits about shorts. So at the beginning, always a good idea. How do you hook your viewer? And so I think a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of people here have kids. You get your kid drawing. How fun would that be if you could take that and then convert that into this animation? It turns out with AI, so Meta pulled this together. It's a Meta product. You basically scan in your photo, and then it'll identify all the joints, and then you can animate it just by clicking on a button. So really kind of fun little project. If you have kids, you could test this out.
You can
with
turn
shorts
your
too. So basically try to hook someone at the beginning. This is kind of the hook, like, hey, you could animate this. And then also what's interesting too, like throughout the short, like here if you look up at the top, there are these little Easter eggs to see if you get people to engage on it. So like, oh, can I learn how to talk to dogs? So people are like, why does he have this other tab open? So these little kind of Easter eggs placed throughout the video. And then it's kind of instructional where it just kind of walks through how you go about doing it and then what the final result looks like. So in a 20-second time period, you kind of get this neat little tidbit that you could go and try on your own. So let's pull this together now. So here I have Davinci Resolve open, and then if you're following along, you should have these 6 different files. One of them is just the final kind of product that we're pulling together, and the other 5 are the files that we're going to use to make this. So I'm going to select all these files, and let's drag and drop that into Davinci Resolve. And here we have it on the cut page. I'm going to jump over to the edit page, and I'm going to use this to pull it together. Now, one thing that I always like to do, and especially I think for a lot of probably our viewers online, this right here is a really beefy machine. So I have complete confidence that it's going to be able to handle all the editing here. But I know a lot of people don't necessarily have the most powerful machines. So one thing that I always like to do when I'm editing a video, especially if, say, I'm using a laptop to pull together one of these videos, is to select the video files. So I have 2 video files here. I'll select them, and then right-click, and then generate proxy media. So a lower resolution version of the video file that kind of lower end or perhaps not as capable machines can handle better. So that's one of the things I'd recommend, and that's one of the things I typically do first. In terms of performance too, if you don't have a high-end machine, another thing that's worthwhile doing is, let's see, if you go to playback and then timeline proxy resolution, you could shift the resolution there down to 1/4. And I found that that also helps with performance if your machine isn't quite as high-end. So those are kind of 2 things that I typically do first to make sure I have a smooth editing performance. So now that we have everything down here, let's take a quick look at what some of these files are. So we have 5 different files here, and let me just zoom in on them a little bit. So we have this laptop frame. We'll work with that. I also have a screen recording, and you'll notice that this is 16:9, so it's not a vertical screen recording. So we're going to work with that, and we're going to adjust it so it kind of fits within a vertical frame. When I go down to this talking head video clip here, this is a vertical video of me, so it's recorded in kind of the proper 16:9 aspect ratio, so that looks good. We also have so we have the soundtrack, or the music that goes along with the video, and then I also have some sound effects, this whoosh effect. So when you see the screen kind of jumping around, we have this sound effect. So those are the different files that we're working with today. So one of the things I like to do to pull together a vertical video is kind of focus on the audio first. So I'm going to pull my talking head video down onto the timeline here. So here you see me talking. So at least what I do when I film these videos is I'll sit in front of the camera and actually narrate the entire thing. And then the screen recording will be kind of overlay or B-roll footage that goes on top of this talking head. And so you'll see with the audio track, I have 2 separate audio tracks. And so one of them, so I have 2 different microphones that I'm recording with. The audio 1, or track 1, this is my kind of professional sounding microphone that I keep close to my mouth. It's just out of frame. So if you see the video shot of me here, if you imagine like an inch above that shot, there's a microphone hanging down. And then the second audio track, this is the on-camera microphone. So I have two different audio tracks, and so one of the tricky things, if I play this here, let's have a quick listen.
You can turn your drawings into animations. Go to the following.
So when you listen to that, I don't know if you could quite hear it here, but there's a slight echo there. And the reason why is the on-camera microphone is in sync with the video, while the separate or external microphone, there's a slight bit of latency there, and so it's not quite in sync. So we're going to have to get those in sync. So let's jump over to the Fairlight page. So I'm going to click over here, and let's zoom in. I'm going to press the Shift key and scroll my mouse wheel just to expand the vertical, and then I'll press the Control key with my mouse wheel or the Alt wheel, and here let's zoom in on the horizontal. So here we can see it a little better, and you'll notice kind of the first thing too is the levels are fairly low. So I'm going to right-click on these tracks and right-click there, and let's start out by just normalizing the audio levels. So I'm going to click there, and here I'm going to set the target level to 0. And actually, one thing I want to do is, let's zoom out a little bit. I'm going to unlink these audio tracks. And let's right-click on the first one, and I want to normalize this. I'll set the target level to 0, click on Normalize, and so that brings the audio levels up, and I'll do the same with this next track. Let's normalize that. And so here, we'll just be able to hear it better, and the levels will be better. And so yeah, once again,
You can turn your drawings into animations.
now you really hear that echo between those two audio tracks. So one of the things I want to do is I want to put these in alignment. So let's go, first I want to go up to Timeline, and there's this option for layered audio editing. I'm going to turn that on, and what that does is if I take this audio track and I pull it down to put them in alignment, if I didn't check that box, it would overwrite the audio track underneath. So that's the reason we're checking that on. And one of the things, I'm just going to cut a little bit of this clip at the beginning. So I'm going to press the, let's see, Control-Shift, open bracket. That is not working here. The shortcut key is not working. So I'll pull this in. I'm just going to shorten that a little bit just so I could get those in alignment. So I'm just going to pull this track. So remember the audio 1, this is my kind of high-quality audio. Audio track 2 is kind of the on-camera mic, so it's not going to sound as good. So I'm just going to pull that down, and I'm just going to eyeball it here and just make sure they're in alignment. So there I see the waveforms. That looks like it's about in alignment. I'm going to press Alt-up arrow, and that's going to throw the audio track up. And now if I play it,
You can turn your drawings into animations.
it sounds like they're in sync now. So I think that's good. We no longer need this audio track underneath, so track 2. So I'm just going to delete that. And then this third track, this is just my PC audio. I'm not using that here, so I'm going to delete that. So now we have kind of one pristine audio track. One thing I like to do too is just as I play,
Picture of your drawing.
if we look over here at the levels for audio 1, typically for audio for YouTube, I like getting that between -10 and -15 dB. So
Select
here when
your
we see it
character and
spiking,
make sure
here it's
that
kind of
the
right around that
background's removed.
range. I think that's a good level to be at. So I think all this audio is in sync now. Some of the other things I like to do with audio. One of the great things about, say, uploading a YouTube video or a TikTok video is you get lots of feedback from people. Some of it positive, some of it negative. But the way I view feedback is all feedback is a gift. And one thing that a lot of people at least told me is, hey, when you speak, there's a strong S sound. And so I was like, oh, okay, let me figure out how I could fix that. Turns out you have a de-esser that gets rid of that S sound. So up on top I'll click on Effects, and right here there's the option for a de-esser. So I'm just going to pull that down onto the track, and I'm just going to go with the male S, just to remove that sound. So that's now applied the de-esser. One of the other things I like to do just to make the audio sound better is to compress the sound, so to lower some of the highs and to pull up some of the lows. So over here under Dynamics, I'll double click here. And right here, I'm just going to turn on the compressor, stick with the defaults, and then close this out. And that's all I'm going to do with the audio. So right here, let's go back to the Edit page now. So here we are in Edit, and if we listen to it.
You can turn your drawings into animations. Go to the following.
Okay, so I think that sounds pretty good now. When we look over on the right-hand side, so we have these two viewers here. We have the source viewer, and then we have the timeline viewer over here. And the timeline viewer, this is kind of reflective of what we're going to be rendering at the end. And when we look at this, we're pulling together a 9:16 video. But we have all these black lines on the left and on the right. And for a short or vertical video, we don't want that. So we need to get rid of that. So over here on the left-hand side, we have this item in the master media bin titled Timeline. So let's right click on that. And right here at the top, let's click on timelines. And then we have timeline settings. So I'll click on that. And if we come over here, right now it's set to use project settings. I'll uncheck that. And we have all these different options. So right now it's set to 1920 by 1080. And we also have this option to use vertical resolution. I'll check that. And here you see it just swaps those. So now it's 1080 by 1920. And that's exactly what, those are the dimensions that TikTok, Instagram, all these different services accept. So we'll go with those. And then right down here, let's click on OK. And now we see those black lines have gone away. And let me actually zoom out just so it fits. We'll go up here. And now that video fits in, and those black lines are gone. So these are the proper dimensions now. So that looks good. One of the things I want to do here is when we look down at the timeline, you'll see that here at the beginning of the video clip. Let me play this. You'll see I'm kind of getting into position, and I move in my chair to kind of get ready to start filming. So I want to make sure I cut that out. And this is by far, if you don't know this shortcut key, this is one that you should definitely use. But if you press Control-Shift, open bracket, that'll basically trim it to where your playhead is, which is really, really cool. And I think actually one thing you can do, one of the great things about DaVinci Resolve is you could customize the heck out of it. So if I click on DaVinci Resolve, keyboard customizations, you could customize all the different shortcut keys. But I know a lot of people here set that like Control-Shift, open bracket, close bracket, a little complicated. A lot of people set it to Q, and then I think also W. So you just press Q to trim the front, and then W to trim the end. So well worth doing that, and that'll definitely speed up your workflow. So here I'll close out of that, and let's go to the end. And here at the very end,
Adorable.
when the clip ends, there I go away, and I stop the recording. So I also want to trim the end, so I'll go up here, and I'm going to press the W key, which is the shortcut key, and there you see it just cuts the end. So little kind of efficiency tips as you're working through and on your video. So the next thing I want to do is let's actually jump into the color page. Now that I've kind of, this is the footage that I want to keep, and let's jump into the color page. And this video is going on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, like all these services. And I'm definitely, when I look at my age, I'm kind of on the older end of users of this. So I want to make sure that I have a very youthful appearance in these videos. So in the top right-hand corner, I'm just going to do something really basic here. Let's click on Effects, click on this search icon, and let's search for Face Refinement. And here, I'll take this effect, and I'm just going to drop it on this main node here. And this is using some of the AI capabilities in DaVinci Resolve. I'm going to click on Analyze, and it's going to go through, and it's going to analyze where my face is throughout this entire recording. So there it finds my eyes, my eyebrows, my nose, my mouth, and here it'll track it through the entire scene. Pretty cool tech. Anytime I touch these AI features, I'm worried I might have a similar experience to the other presentations where things just completely crash. But this looks good. And then now that it's gone through and it's analyzed the entire scene, over on the right-hand side, we have all these different settings we can apply. So one of the best ways to look a little more youthful is to maybe smooth out my skin a little bit. So let's put 0.2 on there. And look at that, my skincare routine really looks like it's working. And then one thing about me is I have 2 young kids, and so they keep me up quite a bit. Let me also get rid of some of the eye bags under my eyes. Let me actually zoom in here so you can see what that looks like. And let's remove those eye bags. Let's apply 0.2, just a little subtle change. And let's zoom in here. Let's see. Yeah, so if I toggle this off and toggle it on, you'll notice that the skin's a little bit smoother, those eye bags are gone. So just a few slight refinements to help me fit in with more of the demographic who uses TikTok. Okay, so let's jump back to the edit page here. So here in the timeline, I have this first section here. Let me go back and play this.
You can turn your drawings into animations.
So that's the intro. That's kind of the hook part of the video. And I want to cut it there because I want to kind of zoom in to kind of pull people into what's happening. So I'm going to press the Control and then the / key. And I guess that is not a shortcut here. So I'll press the B key to open up the blade tool. And let's slice it right at that point. So here if I zoom in, you see that the video is sliced. And I want to zoom in on this. And of course, with DaVinci Resolve, there are many ways to accomplish the same thing. So I could use I could click on the video clip. Let me just click on the video clip. So I could just, in the top right-hand corner, I could click on the inspector. And when I open that up, I could just apply a keyframe on the zoom. And then that's probably the easiest way to do that. So here, I'll just check the keyframe on. Then I'll go up to the end of the clip here. Another neat little shortcut key that you could use is press the down arrow, and that'll send you to the end of the clip. And I'll press the keyframe here, and let's just apply kind of a nice slight zoom. And I think it's actually looking at, yeah. So here we now see, as the clip goes on, we see that it
Turn
zooms
your
in.
drawings into animations.
So I think that looks nice. Kind of pulls the viewer into what's happening on the scene. So now that we have that zoom in on the first clip, next I want to focus on the actual screen recording and kind of demonstrating that. So let's pull the screen recording. I'm going to bring this up into the source viewer over here, and let's listen to the talk track. And then I'm going to pick the part of the video that aligns with that talk track.
Go to the following website.
So here I say go to the following website. And so this beginning portion here, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. The beginning portion here is when I go to the website. So I'm going to press I to set that as the endpoint. And let's just drop this down on the timeline. So here.
Go to the following website.
Perfect. And then the next part that I talk about.
Then upload a picture of your drawing.
And then I say upload a picture of your drawing. So I'm just going to scrub through here. And then find the portion of the video where I upload the video, or upload the image. So right here is where I'm selecting it. So I'm going to press the I key, set that as the endpoint, and I'm going to drag and drop that onto my timeline. And so here we see the upload portion.
Select your character and make sure that the background's removed.
Okay, so I'm going to trim the end of that by pressing the W key. There's that shortcut key again. Yeah, playback's going a little bit slow. And then so here, remove the background. So I'm going to set the endpoint here. And let's drag this down onto the timeline. So I'm basically just aligning the B-roll to match what my talk track is.
Then confirm all of the different joints.
So here we confirm the different joints. That all looks good.
And you can choose your animation.
And then we have the portion where you choose your animation. So I'm just going to jump through here and pick the portion where the animation occurs. So here's where I pick the animation. So I'm going to set an endpoint here, and then let's drag that down onto the timeline. And then at the very end.
And look at that. My little man is dancing.
So there I say my little man is dancing. So here, if I go towards the end of this clip, here I have the dancing scene. So I'm going to set an endpoint there, and then I'm going to drag and drop that down so it overlays the end. And at the very end here, I'm going to jump to the end of this clip, and then I'm going to trim the end of the B-roll. Let's see. Perfect. So I think all of that looks good, and let me just trim the end here just so it ends when the talking head portion stops. So there I zoom in. So here I have all of this footage now. So the next thing I want to do is I want to just represent that, hey, this is all happening on a laptop. So I'm going to press let's press the Alt key, let's zoom out, and I'm going to take this laptop front and I'm going to drag it down on top of this footage. So let me expand this out right until there. And now I want the screen recording to fit within the frame of this laptop. So I want to basically zoom out on some of this so it fits within the vertical size. So with the, let's see, first I'm going to select all of these clips here. And I'm going to, let's see, let me pull this over. Okay, so I think this all looks good. So I'm going to select all these clips, and let's create a compound clip. Oops, 1 second. Yeah, so I'm going to adjust the zoom on this clip, and let's bring that down to 0.25. And I'm going to move it up a little bit. Let's go with 14 here. And I'm going to press Control-C on this clip and then select all of these, press Alt-V, and that way I could paste the attributes. And let's paste all these video attributes in. That way all these subsequent clips have the same zoom level. And then here on the laptop, I also want to zoom out on this, or let's bring this down. And I think 0.31 works well, so there it kind of sits right around this footage. Let me actually move it up. It looks like there's a little bit of a gap at the top. So here I can move this up, and there it fits right within the frame. And let me now apply that to all these other clips. Let's press Alt-V, and let's apply those video attributes. Okay, perfect. And then one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight the laptop frame and the video clip. Let's right-click on that. I'm going to turn this into a compound clip, and then create that. And so now here we have one clip with the screen recording and the laptop frame around it. And I'm going to move this up one layer because right now, if we look at this vertical clip, you'll see the laptop sitting on top of me. I don't want that. So over here, up on top, I'm going to click on Effects. And let's click into Generators. And I'm going to, just for simplicity, I'm going to throw a solid background behind it. And so I'm going to drag this up to the end. And so here we now see the screen recording sitting on top of just a solid background. And let me throw in, let's go with a nice blue here. So now we have the screen recording. So as I'm talking,
Go to the following website. Then upload a picture.
okay. So we have the talk track, we have the laptop, all of that's kind of in sync with the speech. I'm also going to jump to the end here where I demonstrate the animation. Let's
Little
see what
man,
this looks
it's
like.
adorable.
Now it says my little man is dancing, so I just want to align that so that's in the middle of the frame, and here I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we see that dancing guy right there at the end. If I go back here, right now it's a little zoomed out, and I want to make sure that it's a little closer. So we're going to jump into the Fusion page here, and I'll just demonstrate this with kind of one of the shots here, just in interest of time. So here at the beginning, I say, hey, go to this website. So we'll press Shift Spacebar. And let's add a transform node in here. So I'm going to throw that in. So the transform node allows me to zoom in and adjust the positioning. So right here, let me zoom in. This is going to be the kind of beginning shot where I say go to the following website. I'll zoom in, move it over. So this way the website is in focus. And so here we could play it back and listen to the audio track.
Go to the following website. Then upload.
And then it says then upload a drawing. So I want to jump out so you can see me uploading the drawing. So right here, I'm going to add a keyframe. And then let's jump 10 frames forward. So I'll jump up to frame 87. We're going to add another keyframe. And then I say go to the following website. So here I'm going to click on this to jump back to the default zoom setting. Let's zoom in maybe a little bit more. So now we can see kind of how it works. So
Go to the following website.
go to the following website.
Then
And then it kind of jumps out or zooms out. Some of the things, so what I would do is kind of go through the entire clip and I'd adjust it so the portion that I'm talking about is kind of in focus. Down here under image adjustment, just to make it a little bit smoother. When you saw that, it was a little choppy as it was going. So over here, I'll click on animation and let's apply some motion blur, maybe 0.4. I think that'll work nicely. So now you see when it kind of zooms out, you have that nice blur effect as it's going out. And again, I'll go through and do this to the entire video, but just in the interest of time, I'll skip over that. One of the things, so here I'm kind of zooming out. I'll go back to the edit page. And if we go back to the media pool, I have this sound effect right here, so whoosh. So right now my playhead is right where that zoom out is happening. I'll place this sound effect here, and let me zoom in just a little bit. I'm going to place it so the sound plays right as it's zooming out, and let me lower the level on that a little bit. So let's see how that looks.
then up.
So if we watch it,
Then
there
up.
kind of zooms out, and you have that nice whoosh effect that goes along with it. And what I would do here too is as kind of the screen is zooming in or out, apply sound effects just to support that movement. Now, one thing I want to show here is as it's zooming out, it's just kind of a linear move there. So I'm actually going to jump back into the Fusion page. And right here, if we open up the spline editor, let me open up the transform. And you see this is where that zoom out is happening. I'll select all these items and press the S key on my keyboard. And that way you kind of have a slower start and a slower finish. So it's a little bit of a smoother animation there. But I think that looks good. If we go back to the edit page, we'll kind of wrap up the video now. At the very end, we have the dancing man. And I want that to be kind of fun. So here I have this music track. So here I'll just drag and drop it on. Let me trim the end and then also lower the levels. Generally, I find for music, you want that to be around -30 dB. I think that just works better. And that way it doesn't overwhelm the talk track.
And look at that. My little man is dancing. That's adorable.
Okay, so we have the music. And then the very last thing that I want to show is with vertical videos, you'll find that a lot of people consume this type of content without their audio turned on. And so I think what you want to do is so people could follow along, you want to make sure that you have some subtitles that support what's happening. And one of the beautiful things in DaVinci Resolve now is you can automatically generate the subtitles based on the audio track. So here under Timeline, here's the option to create subtitles from audio. I can click on that. Here you can go through, you can choose the language, you have all these different settings. I'll click on Create, and then those subtitles will overlay the video. So that'll go through and analyze, and it looks like it didn't quite work right. But here, if I click on the subtitle, we can go up to track, and here I could adjust the way these subtitles appear. So here I could add some background, and here you now see it, and I could go through and adjust these different settings if I want to say reduce the opacity or adjust the way these appear. But now I have these subtitles, I could adjust the position and all of that. And if it was working properly, you'd see it across the entire video. So this all looks good now. The video, I think, is, of course, you'd want to spend a little more time, get all the animations down. But lastly, click on the Deliver page, and then under Custom Export, one thing you'll want to do to make sure that the subtitles are burned into the video, under Custom Export at the very bottom, you can click on Subtitle Settings, Export Subtitles, and then right here, you could choose what format you want the subtitles to be in, and here you have the option to burn into the video. So that'll just sit on top of the video. So when you export to some place like TikTok or YouTube, those subtitles will appear as part of the video. And then you just go ahead and export it. This option, Use Vertical Resolution, is checked, so it's in the right dimensions. And then you go through, render the video, and you could upload it. And that's kind of the high-level, very quick overview of what that vertical video flow is like. Cool. And I think it's time for Q&A now.
All right, thank you, Kevin. And yeah, let's start accepting some questions from our audience. Yeah, Paul.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks very much, Kevin, for the presentation. That was awesome to watch. I just note when you said that you're at the older end of the scale, I guess I'm buggered in that in that sense. And take a while to get rid of my eye bags and put hair on and do all of that sort of stuff. So I'm not sure if that's worth it.
You might have to go with 0.4.
But I'm just wondering, with TikTok and those sorts of video vertical streaming things, the times that I do get on there, I just find it's 90% rubbish. Mm-hmm. Trying to find good content like this sort of stuff is the challenge. But as a content creator, obviously your aim is to get as many views as you can, and you said this one had an incredibly high number of views. But what's the key benefit for you other than the view rate? Does it bring business back to your website? Can you work out what percentage of that? Like, how do you monetize that if you're lucky enough to get that sort of view rate? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few different ways you can monetize content like this. So you have, I think it's TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook these days. You can actually earn money based on the views for your videos. So all these different services, they show ads alongside your video, and so you get a cut of that. So that's one way, but you do have to get quite a few views to make any serious money from it. Another way is, especially if you start getting a lot of views on your shorts, or your vertical videos, you'll have companies come out and say, hey, can we sponsor a video? So you put together a 60-second video on our product, and then we'll pay you to do that. So that's another avenue. One other kind of approach is if you have some type of product, you could basically tie it back to your organization. And so that's where you could use something like a tracking URL where you could figure out, hey, how many people actually watch this video, come to your product page, and actually end up converting. So I think I'd recommend doing that, just to say, hey, what is the impact, or can we measure, how this vertical video is performing? And then, at least for me personally, like the reason I do it is, I think like as a content creator, you just want to be up on the different platforms and kind of experimenting with them, seeing what's working. I also sell some courses, and so all of it kind of feeds back into the main YouTube channel. And I think there's benefit in having audience kind of on all of these different platforms, because I think they kind of feed back and forth across all of them. And in fact, like anytime I say upload a video to YouTube, I go onto Instagram and then call out the video to that audience, and so it's all about trying to get people kind of cross-pollinating across these services.
First of all, you sounded a lot like Grant Petty, so that was amazing. So second, so when it comes to thumbnails, right now I think there's experiments on YouTube with YouTube Shorts thumbnails, because I don't think it's like publicly available yet. But when it comes to pushing shorts out, because they're significantly quicker content, you want to get them out as quick as possible and pump like a bunch of them out. How much time would it be worth to spend time making like dedicated thumbnails to shorts if that functionality became available?
Yeah, so I think like when you think of vertical content, you have to think of like what is the entry point. And so a lot of vertical videos, most of the traffic for I think most of these short form videos comes from the recommendation or the feed. So you're on TikTok, you're swiping through the feed. And in that case, I don't think a thumbnail really contributes much, because you're just kind of discovering as you're swiping through. And so that's kind of one entry point to a vertical video. So in that case, I don't think it really helps too much to optimize a thumbnail. Although like one thing I found is when you upload, say, a vertical video, you also get a lot of traffic from people searching for topics. So if you go to YouTube and you search for a topic, they also show vertical videos in the results. And that's where a thumbnail does make a difference. Because as a viewer, you're looking through all the results and you're deciding which one to click on, and a thumbnail can help. So I think like the approach I would take is, what is the source of traffic for a vertical video? And if it's predominantly search, then yes, thumbnail makes a big difference. If it's primarily through the feed, then the thumbnail doesn't matter quite as much.
Hi. So I had kind of a two-part question for you. So I assume your content, you kind of knew what you were going for when you started doing this. So question A, why did you film yourself the entire time if you knew you were going to overwrite yourself with other stuff? And then question B, would you just eliminate that track now to reduce the amount of computation needed to produce this video? Or why would you leave it there?
Yeah, so like at least on my workflow, like one thing I like doing is when I have the video throughout the entire clip, let's say I decide that, hey, I want to have like my face in a circle on top of the video. I have that option. So it gives me flexibility by having me on there the whole time. Or maybe I want to have a jump cut where it goes from the screen recording back to me and then back to the screen recording. So it just gives me options.
You just don't know when you're doing it what you're going to want to do.
Exactly, yeah, yeah. Like basically it all comes down to like what can I do to make it as engaging as possible? And I think like if you stay on one screen for too long, people are going to tune out. So just to keep it interesting, sometimes like having it jump, like if I'm speaking and not showing anything, then I'll shift back to my face. Once I start showing something again, then it'll jump back to the screen recording.
Now in this final product, would you have cut out that whole section that you replaced yourself?
In this case, I haven't noticed any performance difference, so I usually just leave it in. And it's a lower layer, so it doesn't get rendered, so yeah.
Kevin, if you burn the captions into the video you export, what about other languages? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so yeah, when you burn the captions in, it's like I'm stuck with English. One thing you can do is so on like I know like YouTube and these all the different, or at least most of the different services, you could also upload an associated SRT file, and that's where you could upload in different languages as well. But in that case, you'd have the burned-in captions, and then the viewer can also turn on their localized captions, and so like you'd have the two captions sitting there. But yeah, I think the trouble is you have a lot of people watch these vertical videos, and they don't turn captions on, but they want the captions to be there. So I just place the English captions on and just assume that's going to be most of the audience. But yeah, not optimal, but yeah.
Do you have any success using shorts to try to pull people to longer form content, or do you kind of treat the shorts as sort of its own video separate of any other content?
Yeah, it's interesting when I dig into the stats, because that was like one of my big questions, like how much do shorts feed the longer form content? And when I look at the analytics, it's almost like two distinct audiences. Like I have noticed some comments where they're like, oh, I love your YouTube videos. Good to see you on like TikTok now. But I think the overlap is, I think it was like 10% consume both. But then otherwise, most of them are on either long form or most of them are either on shorts. So I think there are like distinct preferences for where people consume information. At least that's what I found with my stats. I don't know if that's representative, but yeah. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? All right, let's see, we got some from our online audience here. Question for Kevin, what shortcuts are good that would make the workflow easier?
So what shortcuts?
Yeah.
Oh, shortcuts.
Yeah, shortcuts.
Yeah. So let's see. One thing that I find helps my workflow a lot. So especially when I kind of have a formula for my shorts, and they all kind of match that formula. So like in a lot of my videos, I'll say, hey, I have a listicle format where I'm like, hey, 5 tips and tricks in PowerPoint, or 5 tips and tricks in Excel, and then kind of jumps into the the screen recording and kind of demonstrates them, or my face jumps into one of those little circles kind of as I'm going through it, and so like a lot of them follow that same formula. And so what I end up doing is I just have a project, and every time I work on my next short, I just open the project again and I drop in like the new talking head video, the new audio track, but I keep a lot of the different animations that I have in place. And so everything's already kind of sitting on the timeline, and I just drop in the new video, drop in the new audio, and then I just make a few tweaks here and there. But yeah, that's probably the main thing that I do to streamline the process. Just like, I guess one thing I always try to remember is, like I think shorts, like it's amazing. Like, you know, some of the shorts that you put less effort in end up doing better. And I think there's almost this expectation that like quality is a little bit lower on TikTok. You know, you just pull out your phone, you start recording yourself. And I've experimented too where, you know, instead of like here, if we look at this shot, the talking head, like this is with my, you know, I have my nice lighting, and you know, here I have I'm using my nice camera. But I tried just with my cell phone, just recording with my cell phone and just doing the same thing and performed just as well. So I think there's this, people are comfortable having, you know, the quality not quite as high. But yeah, that's kind of the main shortcut. Have a project that, you know, exists and you could just kind of drop content in. And really, like, the one thing I always try to achieve with shorts is to try to keep the costs low as you're producing it. So try to move quickly with them.
Sure. One more from YouTube here. In delivering the final rendered product, do we need to go back to the proxy media or settings he changed at the beginning for a laptop?
Yeah, so with once you turn on proxy media, when you render the final project, it'll go back and use the original source file. So you don't have to worry about it using the lower resolution copy. It purely, for me, I just want it to be a smooth experience. So like as I'm editing, I don't really care that much how it looks. I just know that when I do the final render, it's going to look good.
Great. How do you convert a PC video into a YouTube short?
Yeah, so I know some people will take an existing, say, YouTube video and then turn that into a short, right? So you kind of leverage your existing content and then you make it available for your short strategy. And I think like one thing that I found works well, so if I jump back to, let's see, the beginning of this.
Go to.
So here, this is kind of a, I guess like a 16:9 video. So it's a kind of horizontal format. And one thing I like to do is like put it in a laptop frame and then focus in or zoom in on the portions that you're talking about. So I think especially if you have video that's 16:9, this is kind of a neat technique that you could use to bring it into a vertical format. Like I don't like as much, like it's always a challenge. Like, well, how am I supposed to film it if it's going to be 9:16? And I don't want to just zoom in. Like I want to give context for where you are on the page. And so I think that's where here, if I go back and play this.
Go to the following website. Then up.
So you kind of jump in and out depending on what you want someone to look at. So they kind of have context of where you are on the page, and then you zoom in on the portions that they should be focusing on. I find that works well.
Okay, great. Any other questions here in person? Awesome. Thank
Cool.
you so much,
yeah,
Kevin.
no, the last thing, I'm looking forward to seeing all of your viral TikTok videos coming up.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Guys, give it up for Kevin Stratford. That was amazing. So cool, so cool. Just again, a wealth of knowledge for everyone across the spectrum, whether you're a beginner or an intermediate or an expert. There's so much applicable knowledge to be shared here, which is why I just love the Resolve community so much. So we're going to be jumping into our first break, which means we're going to be giving stuff away here when we get back. This break sponsored by the following sponsors, and we'll see you here in a little bit. Thank you.
Hey, Casey Ferris here, and I'm really excited to announce our new course, Fusion Zero to Hero. This is a course designed to take content creators from knowing nothing about visual effects and motion graphics to truly thinking like a compositor. We've been making online courses on Davinci Resolve for a long time. We've learned a lot about how to structure courses and how people learn. And the very most important thing to me has always been, I want somebody to be able to do new and amazing things at the end of the course that they couldn't do before. And after a lot of thinking and considering, I realized I love to help people learn to make motion graphics and visual effects. It's like that little extra spice that takes your videos from good to awesome. Seeing that moment when one of the concepts clicks with somebody is really what makes it worth it to me. And it's a magical thing to level up your skills because now you can do something forever that you've never been able to do. It can be truly life-changing for that person. We went back to the drawing board and we really considered what would be the single most effective high-value course we could ever make on Fusion. So we got together a pool of content creators who didn't know much about Fusion, and we asked them what would truly help you reach the next level. We came to one conclusion. Nobody needs a course on Fusion or After Effects or Blender or any piece of software. The software is really just a tool, and you can learn how to use a tool in a lot of different ways. You can binge YouTube videos, you can read books, you can just open up the software and mess around with it. The one defining factor that we see time and time again that makes the difference when someone is learning Fusion is a mindset change. Anyone can follow a series of steps to recreate a green screen effect or design an animation, but the person who's able to take the concepts from those exercises and internalize them and apply them to new ideas is the one that really unlocks the new levels of creativity. Like, those are the people that we see making the epic videos with original ideas and creating new mind-blowing things. So we thought, what if we made a course that didn't teach you just how to use Fusion, but taught you how to think like somebody who is amazing at Fusion? That could really change somebody's career and their creative power and their life. And that's what we've created here with Fusion Zero to Hero. It's an online course designed for content creators who edit with Davinci Resolve. And we start not just with the basics of the Fusion page, but the very foundations of why you'd even want to use the Fusion page. We dive into the concepts of visual effects and animation and motion graphics to build a solid foundation so that you know what the heck you're talking about, and you have an idea of what's involved and the kinds of things that are even possible. The course guides you through our specially designed roadmap to take you from knowing nothing about graphics and effects to being comfortable with the tools and creating your own strategies on how to solve problems and create original effects and make beautiful animations. We're not just teaching you how to use the tools, we're teaching you how to think for yourself. The other major problem with online courses is that they're often not really very interactive. If we really want to help you learn, we have to be able to connect with you on a regular basis. So when you get the course, if you want to, you can join us on Discord, which is a free platform where you can connect with other students and ask questions and get help anytime you need. So you'll have an invite to join our server that's been totally redesigned to support your learning journey and help you build that compositor's mindset. And every few lessons, you'll have a challenge to test your skills and check in to see where you're at. You can post the challenges sort of like homework and get quick feedback from other students and from our team. You'll also have access to my new live workshops, which are on Discord, where I work with you one-on-one to solve any problems or clarify concepts where you might be having trouble. This way of working together and sharing in community and getting that high quality feedback, it just turbocharges learning. Here's what some of our students have to say.
I didn't know how any of the nodes worked or any of the concepts. After just 1 week, everything changed. Anytime I have interesting ideas or cool things that I want to do, I know how to do that in Fusion and I don't have to rely on the edit tab. I basically just leveled up my my video editing game.
I was completely self-taught when I started the Ground Control Fusion course, so I really liked how it broke it down into these very easily digestible pieces so that you could learn at your own pace and you could also follow along because I'm a visual learner, so that worked really well for me.
The course has given me the confidence I needed to go from doing very basic VFX and motion graphics to becoming a better compositor. It gives you the confidence and the abilities to do what's in your head and bring it to life.
I thought I knew a fair bit about editing until it came to Fusion. Now, thanks to this course, I understand what it is to be a compositor versus an editor.
I'm actually able to look at other creators' videos and understand how to break that down within the Fusion page. In my opinion, I think overall when you encompass everything in there and also the compositor's mindset that you'll adopt as a result of this, that ability to look at videos, understand how things are made and then be able to recreate yourself, I think that this course is worth the price.
Basically, we've created this course to be unlike any other course on the planet. You can learn to do an effect anywhere, but we're not teaching you how to do an effect. We're teaching you how to think like a compositor. And that's going to be the key to making the things that you can only dream about. So, are you in? The course is called Fusion Zero to Hero. It's available now at groundcontrol.film.
So we use Puget systems for all our computers here. And for us to be able to experiment, we need these powerful computers to be able to pull that off. When we think about future projects, we don't think about them from a hardware capability. Like virtual production running into Unreal Engine with real-time rendering, it's all just happening right there. And at this point now we're getting into artificial intelligence, deepfakes, image generation, audio processing. There's a whole bunch of crazy bits of technology, and it's working now because we work with Puget computers.
All right, friends, come in, find a seat. Enjoyed the break here. We got some stuff to give away. It's day 3. We got to get through this kind of stuff. So for our online winners, we have a copy of Nobe Omniscope going to Jenny O'Byrne. Congratulations. A copy of ADD Pro to Mussy, and a Cloud Store Mini for Stephanie Moreau. Congratulations. You'll be sent an email from the email you used to register, so expect an email here in a little bit. And an in-person editor, Tom, not Thom, Tom Lyons won a speed editor. Congratulations. Thank you so much for those sponsors making that giveaway possible. We appreciate it. Blackmagic Design, Audio Design Desk, and Mammo World. Thank you so much. All right, guys, the coolest person in the room is going to be presenting now. She literally wrote the book on color. She doesn't need much of an introduction, but give it up for Daria Fissoun.
Thank you. Where's the camera? Somewhere there. Oh, there. Hey, everyone. Wow, this took a really intimidating introduction. I know how to live up to that, actually. Hi, my name is Daria Fissoun. I am a colorist by trade, and I also do a bit of like workflow development for companies. So that's what I do nowadays. And I just want to launch into it. I want to show you a case study of a project that I was approached with like January this year. And it was actually the original filmmaker, the director of the project, who had captured it in 1991 on DV tape. And he wanted to restore it to 4K and pretty much submit it to posterity, so at the University of Hawaii. He wanted it to be a historical document, right, that would be kept for students there. So a lot of the visual cleanup was done via AI, and like the whole story of how I communicated with the client, my inexperience with AI, and him convincing me that I should do it anyway, and that he would basically pay for the trial and error process of me learning how to use it and applying it on the software, on the footage. That's this whole other thing. I'm going to focus on the color grading half of the restoration. And even though I'm talking about this project in particular and DV tape upscaling, I think a lot of it is transferable to just regular color grading. Hopefully there's a lot of like new stuff here or different alternative approaches that you can take away with you for your own projects. There is a shared project file that has been uploaded, I think, on the website. I wouldn't advise like following along right now, because I think I'm just gonna like really run through it. There's a lot of stuff to cover, a lot of exciting things to show. So maybe later on watch it and try to follow along. Gratefully, the director of the film, so that's Nicholas Rosa, he's actually agreed to share the original project file with people. So I've been able to trim the first 5 minutes, but it's in the original DV format in fields, so you can actually kind of set it up the way that I'm about to do. So let's see, I'll find the original video. It'll be in my favorites. Where is it? Where am I? So it is called Anahola. Here it is, and this is what you should be seeing. I'm going to mute it. What's cool is that the first like 5 minutes of the film or so is basically a montage of a lot of the scenes that show up later on. So there's a lot of footage to play around with. And as you can see, this looks pretty typical to DV tape or VHS tape in terms of like how the colors are captured and represented. So there's a lot to work with in terms of restoration. To import this clip, I would ideally want to use scene cut detection, because as you can see, the whole thing is baked in, right? So this would be very difficult to grade as a single file, right? So I need these to be separated. I'm going to make a bin for my videos. Actually, preemptively, I can make one for my timelines as well. So always good housekeeping. I have videos selected, and whichever bin you have selected in the sidebar here, that's where your imported media is going to land. So I'm going to right-click and use Scene Cut Detection, like so. And at the top, the viewers are going to represent where the cuts are being detected and placed by Davinci Resolve. I won't go too deeply into this because there's like tutorials about how to use this tool. But basically, I can click Auto Scene Cut Detect in the bottom left corner, and the software analyzes the content of the media, and wherever it detects a significant enough fluctuation of contrast and chrominance, it will assume that that is a new scene. There are some things that can trip it up, like jump cuts or dissolves, right? So here, for example, we have like this transition, and that's been sort of designated as like a series of cuts, which it's not. So there is a conforming process to this stage, and I have already done this for us. So I've shared this file with you. If you'd like to import the scene cut information, you can go into the options of this window, and where is it? Load scene cut. It's a proprietary file format, .sc for Davinci Resolve. But if you were collaborating with someone in a different application, you could do the same thing with an EDL format. It's the same information, it's just cut points. So I'm going to load scene cut, and there it is. I've already set it up. It's anahola.sc. Ooh. I'm going to click open, and that's cleaned up my timeline. So it looks almost identical, but there's now more confident cuts without the dissolves. I can also see that there's a couple of cuts that I know are real cuts, right? So you can see there's like one frame here and a different frame on the bottom left, which means that the preceding frame is from a different scene, but there's not a green line on the edit. And that's because it's a low confidence cut, right? So the software is not super sure if that's really a cut. I can pick up my magenta confidence line and just drag it down, and that will turn the line green. So now I have incorporated it into my cut list. All right, and that's all I'm going to do. So I'm really speeding through this. I'm going to add cuts to media pool. And, oh, this is pretty good. I've got a pop-up saying, hey, do you want to change the project frame rate? And the reason I would choose to change versus not changing is basically like what my deliverable standard would be, you know, whether I'm trying to conform my archival media to my project or vice versa. So if I knew that my deliverable was, you know, 24 FPS and I'd already set up my project that way, then I would not want to change the files. But in this case, I actually do want the project to conform to the frame rate of the media because it was captured in fields. You can probably tell that this is field footage, but I'll come back and show you. I'm not talking about the literal field in the shop, by the way. I'll come back in a second. I'll show you what that looks like. But yeah, I will click change because I do want it to adopt the characteristics of my video media in terms of resolution and frame rate. Okay, so it looks like nothing has happened, but if I move this scene detect interface out of the way, you can see that all of these clips have been placed into my media pool. So that means it's successful. I can close that interface by clicking on the X. And now I have a series of individual clips, right? If I select these, you can see that I can drag, you know, front to end of each clip, and they're all individual for grading, which is perfect. I can now create a timeline out of these. Can I? No, let's look at the project settings first, actually, just before I dive into that. So I'm going to press the gear icon here, and the resolution of the original footage, if I look in my metadata, is 720 by 486. So this is the NTSC standard of DVCam. So more old school. This is pre-high definition video. I am going to be upscaling to 4K. So I'm going to change my timeline resolution to 4K UHD. That will be my deliverable. Now, when it comes, pixel aspect ratio is fine. With 4K, it's always going to be square. The timeline frame rate, I am going to keep to 5994, which is the original, and you can see that it's not frames per second, it's fields. A field is half a frame, technically, and they're interlaced, so it's kind of like Venetian blinds. You only see half the frame at any given time, but on a broadcast signal, when you play back 60 frames a second, it looks equivalent to seeing 30 progressive or full frames per second. Because it's happening so fast, you're not even aware that they're missing half of the information, they're just constantly like playing through. So this is all looking good. I don't need to change anything else. I'm going to click Save, and now I can create a timeline out of these clips. By default, they will usually land in the media pool in the order that they appeared in the original rendered video, but you can double check by going into List View and looking at your start timecode, so you can see that's all in order. And now I'm going to press Command A or Control A to select everything, right-click, and create a new timeline using these selected clips. All right, so the name of the project was Anahola Restoration. And I'll leave all the settings as they were in my project settings. Cool. So that's created a timeline asset. It's got a little orange tick telling you that this is the current active timeline, and there's a little icon in the bottom left corner. So I'm going to drag it into my timeline spin to make it easier to access like so. And then I can double click it to launch the edit page and see the film down on the timeline. So like I said, I've shared the first 5 minutes of the film. This is them. You can follow along and do what I'm about to do. The first thing I had to do for the project before I even did the color correction was to upscale it, right, and to de-interlace it. I also had like a pretty long conversation with the director about his intentions for this restoration, like how heavy did we want to go in terms of how clear we made it. And it was like, it is for like historical documentation, right? So it's not about beautifying it necessarily, right? It's being able to represent a certain period of time and an event that happened during that time. So something he was very keen on doing as a photographer himself was restoring some of the things that he was not able to do with the limited technology that they had in '91. So they had like access to certain types of like primary grades, certain types of balancing, but there was almost none of that done on this project. So he wanted to finally take advantage of that, right? He wanted to color correct. He wanted to do some secondary corrections. And there was also like things in terms of subject separation, right? So as a photographer, he really wanted people to stand out in the environment that they were in, like in the scenes that he had framed. And he felt that it wasn't conveyed as successfully as he wanted to the first time round. So this was his opportunity to sort of clean it up. Yeah, before the secondary grades, the upscale was performed with an external AI software, as I mentioned. It was called Topaz. I'm not going to do it here, and I'm not going to use the footage from Topaz, but what was funny is that after I had completed the upscaling, right, so I actually blew this footage up to 4K, and I used AI to like sharpen it and add detail, he really didn't feel comfortable with how it looked, how clear it looked. He was like, why does everyone look so wrinkly? Why are everyone's like teeth outlined? It was actually pretty intense. So I ended up blending it a fair amount, probably like restoring the original sort of VHS tape by about a factor of 70%. So there's actually not that much AI in the final project. It does still look like VHS at the end. It's just a little bit smoother. It's a bit nicer. So what you can accomplish on your own with this project that I've given you is probably close to what I've achieved. Something else you can do in terms of upscaling inside of Davinci Resolve itself is there is an upscale feature in the clip attributes, which we now in 18.5 have access to in the inspector as well. So you can see super scale down here on any given clip. So in fact, let me move on to a clip that maybe has a bit of detail that we can keep an eye on. So it's got like a structure and a van in the back here. If I have this clip selected, so let me see if I can zoom in as well. What are the shortcuts on this workstation? There we go. Select that. I'll click on the label to expand it. And then I can click the toggle to activate it. And right now the superscale, one of the algorithms that it offers is enhanced, which is the latest one. But you've got 2x, you've got up to 3x and 4x. And you'll see a slight shift in the image, and that's pretty much like intelligently bumping up the quality of the image. I'm going to keep it relatively light because I feel like it's already doing a pretty good job. So if I turn off superscale, you can see it goes a little bit fuzzier. Let me clear my source viewer. There we go, so it's not so distracting. In fact, I'll make it a mono viewer. No, actually, I'll keep it like that. Cool, so when I activate superscale, just look at the details on the van, and there we go. All right, so it's upscaled it a bit, but it's not too aggressive. It still does look like VHS. All right. In terms of interlacing, that is something that Davinci Resolve will do automatically. And you can tell if your footage is interlaced by looking at motion in a shot. And you'll basically see the interlace lines appear around areas of motion. So if you've got a moving person or an animal or a car, there will be like these actual horizontal streaks. Interlacing is kind of an interesting phenomenon because it was like an issue for probably a pocket of about like 10 or 15 years in filmmaking because we were shooting in fields, but we were editing digitally on digital displays, and that's where you see interlacing. But you would never see fields on a CRT display because that's exactly what they're designed for that playback. And nowadays, we don't shoot interlaced, we shoot progressive. So there really is just like an actual pocket of like workflows in which we experience this. I can show you that de-interlacing is happening automatically. Because if I go into the clip attributes of this one clip, where is it? I can just go into my clip menu over here, find clip and media pool. Has it highlighted? Am I missing it? There it is. I'll go into the clip attributes. And you can see here we have our field dominance controls. So this is a reference to the fields that it was shot in. And by default, because the metadata is still present in the file, it knows how to deinterlace it based on its lower field preference. But if you change it to progressive, this is not a progressive shot, so it will be incorrectly treated. So as soon as I click progressive and I apply this, I'm going to click OK. There it is. This is actually the original footage. It's interlaced. So what you saw before that, that is Resolve just doing a really good job of automatically fixing this issue. And what you're seeing is like 2 frames automatically. And the reason why there's like a weird ghosting effect is because each field is only capturing 1/60th of a second. So if there's motion, an object will move as it goes. Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to show you, like prove to you this is legit footage. But I will change it back to its lower field deinterlace. Beautiful. And we also established that we're going to super scale it by a factor of 2x. I can just apply it en masse to all the clips in my videos bin by Control A and then right-clicking, choosing Clip Attributes. And whenever you want to change a parameter across multiple clips, you will see checkboxes appear on the left-hand side. So I can select to overwrite the superscale parameter and set it to 2x for all of them. And then sharpness and noise reduction, I'm happy to leave on like the default medium. I'm going to click OK. And that's it. Now everything is set to 2x superscale. So we've got a little bit of that finer detail on all these edges. Okay, so that was more or less the setup of the project done. Now we get to start doing the fun stuff in the color page. What was really delightful for me was that this was a rare occasion for me to work with color bars. So I'm not usually on the receiving end of color bars, I'm usually on the sending end, right? So when you're done with your video project, you pop them in at the start of the playback, you send them to a broadcaster, and the reason why they need the color bars is because irrespective of what device you're delivering on, you know, what type of tape, what type of hardware you were working on in whichever standard or whatever year or decade, they can read those bars in a very particular way in their scopes and recalibrate the colors to match the standard that they're viewing and transmitting in, right, importantly. And of course, because you're delivering a single self-contained video file, once they perform that calibration on just the bars, that will apply across your entire deliverable, right? So then they're going to see the same colors that you were seeing on your monitor, right? That's the whole idea behind attaching these to your video file. So for me, when I saw this, I was like, oh, this is so cool. I can actually calibrate these clips so that I can see what viewers in 1991 saw on their CRT displays, which I think is really cool. So I'll show you as quickly as I can how I was able to do this. Let me make a node just for this color bars adjustment. Bear in mind that this is not the same thing as like a color correction or color matching. This is not going to say like handle any of the issues that the footage had in terms of like balancing, for example. It felt like the camera is unbalanced a fair amount of time, like because they were shooting and traveling like in one go. They'll go indoors and outdoors and just keep rolling the camera. So some shots are like cooler and some are warmer. The color bars are not going to address any of that. That still needs to be fixed. But okay, so what I would really like to have is a reference to color bars for the NTSC standard, right? Because right now I can see how my scopes are interpreting these primaries and the luminance data, but I don't exactly know what to do with this just yet. So let me turn off colorize and brighten it up. The two things that I need the most are these two, the vector scope and a luminance waveform. Okay, you could probably guess what the vector scope is trying to do, right? Like what we ideally want to achieve. All of these bars need to be landing on the 75% legal point in the vectors. And you can see that they're almost there, they're just a little bit off. So I can actually do this, yeah, just as we are right now. Technically, I could do it in the color warper because that controls color and saturation, right? So that's both of these factors represented in the vector scope. But I found because there is a resolution to the warp, it can be a little bit limiting to how cleanly I could move the colors. So I wanted something a little less restrictive, which meant actually going back to more old school tools. And this was something I found consistent across my whole workflow, is I kept having to take a step back and go like, actually, let's go much older school for this. And that was the best application for this, like relatively low bit depth footage. So with the curves, I would go to my hue versus hue curve and my hue versus sat. And I could just use the swatches at the bottom here to drop down a whole bunch of anchors. And then I could select a point and rotate or extend the saturation of all of these individual bars. Interestingly, I don't even have to look at the color bars themselves. Like, this is the only thing I'm interested in, is the vector scope. So let's see, what is off in terms of rotation? Red is almost there, but maybe it can be cleaned up. So I'm going to select the red control point and just shuffle it off. There we go, just a little bit. The magenta, I think, is just there. It needs to be saturated. Same thing for blue. Maybe cyan as well. Needs to be rotated ever so slightly and maybe desaturated. And then green is pretty close. We can come back to this. Cool. So that's kind of one thing done already. Let me zoom in and show you before and after. Control D. Very small adjustment. If I go into hue versus sat, so this is going to control how close to the center versus to the exterior parameter these points are. So low saturation versus high saturation. And I can do the same thing. See how the magenta point is just a little bit lower than it needs to be. I want it to be here. I can click on my magenta point and extend the saturation. So it goes far, goes down. And it has kind of like offset the rotation a little bit, so I can always come back. And oops, I kind of kicked my anchor point a little bit. There we go. Rotate it, and then it's done. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, because this is just like one element of working on this clip. Green is the last one to go. Okay. Wait, where am I? My magenta again. Pick green. And that's it. I have centered all these points. That's my before, that's my after, and that's pretty much what broadcasters would have been doing on their end, to varying degrees of complexity. If I disable the color bars node and you look at the viewer, you can see probably, what is it, magenta is being affected the most, and red, and that's all good. I probably, by the way, should have looked at my color management settings before I did all this. I think it's not color managed, that's fine, I can keep going with it the way it is. So the next thing will be the luminance, and off the top of my head, I might not know where these need to land. I mean, I kind of do, but I also just want to be certain because there's so many different sort of variables. Thankfully, Davinci Resolve has a color bars generator. Let me just create one and use it for reference. I'll have a dedicated timeline for it. So right-click Timelines, create new timeline. There we go. Go into Effects, Generators, there they are, all of them. So in particular, I'm interested in the SMPTE color bar. Okay. Let's see, let me turn on tabbed timeline so I can see both of these at the same time. I'll open up this one as well, yeah. And as I'm looking, as I'm jumping between the two of these, do you notice something? They don't match, do they? A little bit they do, the ones at the top, but at the bottom it looks very different. Right, so what's really cool about Davinci Resolve is that the SMPTE color bar generator is just that, it's a generator. It will refresh and reflect whatever standard it's currently located in. So because we've got a 4K project, it is actually giving us a 4K UHD SMPTE bar for that standard, which is great if we're delivering 4K, which we are later on, but I actually want to view NTSC. So in this new timeline that I have, I'm going to right-click, go into my timeline settings, and I will actually overwrite to my project settings and set my timeline resolution to the original 720 NTSC standard, like so. So if you're not even sure which one you need, you can always look at the original footage and see what the resolution was. 720 by 486, I believe, is what I need. And as soon as I select that, the generator changes, and it's not giving me the correct bars. Right? Identical to what we have in the client's video. If I go to the color page now to grab a reference, oops, they're gone. Because generators cannot be displayed in the color page. It only works with bitmap or full pixel data. So you need to rasterize generators before you can work with them in the color page. I'm going to right-click and turn this into a compound clip, which is one form of rasterization in Davinci Resolve. And I'll give it the same name, color bars. It's nice, it's snappy. There we go. I go into the color page, and now I have pretty much imprinted this data, and it is accessible to me. And the great thing is that if I refer back to my scopes, it is giving me a readout of exactly where all of these swatches live, right? The limits that I'm meant to be hitting. So I'm going to right-click and grab this as a still, and then at the top of the viewer, I am going to switch to my movie. All right, and that's giving me a readout for these actual movie bars. Let me double-click to wipe my reference to my viewer, and in fact, I'm going to drag this all the way across so that I can just use a shortcut to jump between the two. All right, so I'm still using the wipe mode in the viewer, by the way. I've just grabbed the very edge of it so that I'm completely covering up the screen. And then when I press Control or Command W, I'm toggling the wipe action on and off and seeing them on top of each other. So there I could see my reference movie is hitting all the right points as a star, which is what's happening in my movie one as well. And when I look at the luminance, I can actually see how I need to restore this. I can see that there is one white point element in my reference, which is this box over here. And in my movie, it is landing exactly where it needs to be, right? So a value of 1023 or 100%. However, there's also this grayer bar in the top left, and that's meant to be 75% according to the reference, right? So it's right flat there on 768. But when I jump to my movie, you can see that it's substantially brighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to fix this using the curves. It doesn't mean that this is the most efficient way of doing it, but it's the way that I've found. So if I drag this down, you can see that I can bring those bars lower. The problem, though, is that this also drags down the white point. So I'm actually going to leave the white point where it was, and instead I'm going to target a lower end of the graph. And then I will achieve a dampened gray over here, 75%. I've just realized, though, because I'm doing this on YRGB, I've also affected saturation. So I could probably do the same thing with just the Y curve. Yeah, and not touch the saturation. Okay. So when it comes to luminance, that's kind of what I wanted to achieve, right? So touching the white point here, touching 75% here, and then everything else is sort of, quite pleasingly cascaded according to where it needs to be, right? So for the upper midtones. The last thing that's remaining is this detail over here. So let me see if I can full screen this. There we go. Might be a little, it's much easier to see on the projector, actually. So to my eyes, this almost looks like a black horizontal bar with a slightly elevated mini bar over here. And then there's a slightly darker one to the left, so that's our minus 2%. And I want to say +2, but it looks more like a +4. But this is NTSC, so this would have been a different standard. Anyway, this would have been referred to as an undershoot or a sub-black feature. And what's interesting is that if you see this on a digital display, so let me, show you the reference, not full screen. Where is it? There it is. This is my reference. You cannot see this black bar, right? It's been completely crushed across the black point. And this is actually for the benefit of broadcast transmission technologies. What would happen is that the signal would get amplified before it reached the consumer on a CRT. So they would see those negative 2%, right, back in the day in 91. Nowadays, though, if you transmitted this on a digital signal, that 2% would remain crushed, as it is over here. So I will not, at the time that I was restoring this, I chose not to arbitrarily crush the bottom 2% of the image. I decided to keep it because we're on a digital display. I'm not envisioning any amplification, so people are going to see it exactly as it appears in my viewer. So fun fact, that amplification of the signal, which was accomplished by the mains, transmitting the signal to the screen, is actually why we have legal broadcast levels. Because in the shadows it gives us more details, but in the highlights it just blows out the image and it looks terrible. So this is why we always had to clamp highlights when we delivered via like DV cam tape. We don't have to anymore as much. So I think I've talked enough about the bars. I want to make sure we have time. Is that the remaining time, or is that how long I've been talking? Oh my gosh. All right. So I did. No, everyone's been nice. I ran really badly over last time I talked, and Dan was really sweet about it. But afterwards, like after the conference, he came up and he was just like, Daria, I know where your family lives, And I was like, oh my god, no, Dan, I won't do this again, I promise. Okay, let's keep going. Yeah, let me show you. First of all, you're probably curious, okay, like how is this color bar solution actually affecting the rest of the footage? So I'll show you a couple of examples, and then I'll start building like a fixed node tree. So let's see, anything. Number 4, so this is the opening shot, so why not? Where is it? So I'm going to middle click clip number 1 to carry across the color bars, the adjustment that I just made. And this is basically, we're going from the digital image that I received. Let me hide my timelines, there we go, and just kind of expand, the viewer. So this is the original video I received, and this is with the color bars adjustment. So as you can see, the colors pop very differently, and this is more akin to what viewers would have been seeing. Anything else I wanted to show it on? I think this is all good. Like I can show it on clip number 7 as well. See, there's a little bit of detail that comes back in the highlights that we didn't see before. So I think that's quite nice. But let me reset this for now. Once I started doing the restoration, like I think I talked about this earlier, like offline, that I don't really have like one workflow for my projects because I work with such a really wide range of productions. I pretty much develop things from scratch every time. And I usually color grade like maybe 10 or 15 shots throughout the movie, and I try to get a feel for like what it needs. And then I get an idea of like, okay, I find myself repeating the following actions. So I'm going to incorporate this into my workflow to be more efficient. So in this case, I found that a fixed node tree was actually one of the better solutions. I personally prefer to keep node pipelines as compact as possible, like as simple as I can. But in this case, it actually blew up and became like interesting, a bit more complex. So let me do this on the basis of clip number 4, which we've already started with. I'll show you, I'll try to really quickly build up the node tree and then really focus on 1 or 2 interesting factors that I found. So one thing I had was a denoise node. This was not applicable to the majority of the footage, but there were some late night scenes, like they were doing like a luau in the middle of the night, and that is very grainy, so I had to address that. But I had this node, I had like a rudimentary denoise setup in the motion effects panel, but then I would instantly disable it, right? So as I copied it across the timeline, it was not like a heavy process that immediately triggered render caching. I would activate it when and if needed, and then I would further tweak the settings. Okay, so that's fine. I then had what am I doing? Did I start playing back? Oh, right, I just hit my own shortcut for labeling the nodes, and that's not anything here, so let me try again. There we go. So I call it normalization. Other colorists call it exposure, whichever you call it. It's just about writing the tonality of the image, or the luminance, less so the chrominance or saturation. I'm just going to see if I can quickly apply a shortcut. Oh, it is a tab. Oh, thank you, Dan. All right, I will keep using tab then. All right, so normalization. Something else I found I was doing a lot was working on the highlights. Let me see if I can zoom in. There we go, for all our benefits. Actually, let's give me a bit more room, yeah, in the node editor. So highlights. And then parallel to that, I was also doing shadows. So it doesn't mean I did it on every single clip, but every now and then I'd look at something and I'll be like, there's a lot of good stuff hiding in the shadows. I just want to have a node in which I can focus on that. What else was I doing? Well, I was balancing, of course. Oop. And something that is very, I think, common to documentary filmmaking, and especially like on older cameras, is you can really tell when the temperature or the tint is off. So as well as shooting outdoors a lot, they were also shooting like interviews in offices, you know, like 90s offices, you know, so like really harsh fluorescent lighting, and people would be captured like bright green or bright purple. So I had temp and tint set up the same way that the highlights and shadows were. And again, you wouldn't use both on a shot, but you would use one or the other, and it was sometimes a quicker way to adjust the balance than using like the balance node itself. What else? I also did the contrast. Oops, and that was through like a variety of methods. I'm not really gonna go, I feel like, you know, there's a lot of tutorials about this stuff. And oh, in fact, I think there have been some fantastic ones over the past few days. There was a lot of like presentations where I was watching and I'm like, this is so great. They're covering like the back end of what I'm talking about, so I'm not gonna have to go into it as much. So thank you everyone of the previous presenters for helping me out. And then saturation at the start of the next line. So just so you understand what I'm doing, I am essentially making a template that I'm going to reuse across the rest of the movie. All right, so this is where things got interesting. I realized that a lot of the content in the shots was based on memory colors, so there was a lot of primary greens, yellows, reds, and blues, and I figured, like, why not have vectors for those, right? So I can have dedicated nodes just for those channels, and then I can tweak them. Because a lot of what was happening was this kind of thing, where we've got a montage of the beach, and then suddenly it's another shot, it's close-up, but the water looks very different, right? So they were kind of using two different cameras to record the film, but also they were capturing different times of the day. So this is clearly golden hour, you could tell because like the foam looks a little yellow. And then there would be like more midday shots, you know, and here the water looks a bit more green, whereas here the water looks a bit more blue. So basically it was just about making something cohesive, you know, just tweaking the blues to look more like each other. So a quick way I found of doing this is making these vectors, and I'll show you where you can find them. In the color menu, you can, where are they, presets? And you can see that there are 6 vectors, and I think I have seen like another filmmaker using this for restoration as well. They were working with celluloid film. He was using 6. I found I just needed the 4 that I mentioned, so green, yellow, red, and blue were the main colors that I kept coming across. So I'm gonna call that one green. What else have we got? Nope, not Alt-S, Alt-P. Go back to the color presets. Yellow. I'm not even looking at the clock right now. I just build. Alt-P. Red. And blue. Okay, so what are these doing? They have some automatic qualifier selections already in place. So when I select green, for example, that's got a green swatch. And let's see, let me turn on highlight mode. And these didn't always like grab the areas that I needed. So while I'm still in the template, I wanted to make that correction and just make sure that it was more like representative of the type of colors that I saw in the footage. And I also deactivated like saturation and luminance, again, just for the purpose of this project. There we go. There are a few like yellow elements, but again, the selection is more like a yellowy green. So I'm gonna drag it and disable saturation and luminance. And you can always correct these after the fact, right? As you start working, you don't have to keep the same range selectors on the HSL. And there's not really much red here, but this was really helpful for skin tones. And then finally you had blue, and that's great. So again, deactivate saturation and luminance. And that was pretty good. What's interesting is that it's almost like selecting magenta, and it's still capturing so much of the sky. Okay, and then I will show you a few examples of how this works. Yeah, before I move on with the other, like the final like touches on the nodes. So let's see, which clips should I show you this on? I've got clip number 6 selected. Let me middle click clip 4, and you can see I can take the entire node tree across. And the only thing happening here would be the mild shift that the color bars are giving us. So hang on, let me turn off highlight mode. There we go. So this is just the color bars doing their thing. Then we move on to clip number 7. And again, apply the entire pipeline. And here, what bothers me is the color of the water. So here it looks a bit more neutral. And I'm just going to go into my blue settings. And you can use any amount of features, any preference that you have. You can use the color wheels. You can even use the hue parameter to rotate the colors. Or just push it slightly towards blue with the gamma. And maybe even brighten it, because I think that was lighter in the original footage. And it's looking very saturated as well. I wasn't really desaturating as much. It looks a little different on this monitor compared to the grading monitor that I had, but bear with me. All right, same thing here. I apply the same template pipeline that I had. And again, I could just make a correction to the blue node, this time making it more warmer, more green, to match this sequence. All right, so I'm kind of focusing on the water right now. But then the sky is looking too similar to the water, so I could also make a new parallel node just for the sky. I can reuse the key information from my sky node, so I don't have to grab that sort of blue range HSL, but I can use a window to limit my selection to just the sky. So that way I can grade it separately. Let's see. Won't really affect the shadows anyway, because I'm going to go for more of a mid-tone or gamma range. But yeah, then I could just rotate the hue in a different direction, or lighten it or darken it, or just make it more blue with the gamma, bypassing the black point. So that way there's a little bit of a separation between the sky and the water. It doesn't just look like a monotone. And now I'm getting more, as it plays back, there's a bit more consistency between the shots. So that's one of the things I was doing, just fixing a lot of skies and a lot of water. Let me see, just a couple of other notes. How are we doing? We're still doing it. We're going to do this. It's going to be fine. How great would it be if, during the Q&A, ooh, what did I just do? Whoa, what is this setting? What is this bar? This is blowing my mind. Is it Alt F? Is that where I am? Control F?
It's the highlight thing. Just a second.
Whoa.
Yeah. Let's see.
Oh, that was something unrelated. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. I think is it good now?
It should be. What did I do? This is definitely the viewer. So it looks like I've full screened it. Okay, let's go to the workspace so I don't touch any dodgy shortcuts again. Let's see. Nope, that wasn't it. I feel like we need to go into overtime, because I feel like I'm wasting time now that's not related to my talk, right? There it is, full page. There we go, there we go. And you know what? This has been bothering me for at least half an hour now. There's a marker on the timeline. You can see it in the top left corner. No. Okay, back to the color page. Okay. So, order has been restored. Something I was doing a lot of was de-fringing the footage. So if I look at some of these shots, these two in particular, so you could see how there's these blue edges on a lot of the elements, and this tends to happen if you're shooting against a super bright background or sky. You can often see it on the edges of buildings. So you can see purple fringing on some cameras. I think it also has to do with chromatic aberration of the lens. It's got something to do with that. And then, here it shows up as this blue outline towards things, and it just doesn't look good, right? It kind of makes it look more cheap, like cam footage. So I was dampening that down, lifting some of that blue, and also doing a slight amount of sky replacement. So not heavy duty sky replacement, but just adding a bit of color to the sky so it didn't look pure white. So I'll do that in 1 second as I finish my template. I would also have like a series of just serial nodes for other things that I was doing, like a little bit of face refinement, which I can also hopefully show you in a second. And I would finish the whole thing off on a vignette, just in case I felt like I wanted to like center the image and draw the viewer's eye. So once I had built, this was more or less the type of pipeline I was using, I would grab a still from the viewer, and that would be my template. So I would even call it that. And I would reuse it on the other clips on the timeline. I think maybe Casey already mentioned this, or Darren, but if you go into your preferences, as a user, I want to say, maybe in editing, no, color, yes. Preserve node numbers when adding nodes. So this is pretty important if you want to be able to like transmit changes across these types of pre-built node pipelines, because if you do something in node number 5, for example, in shadows, and you want to then copy that effect across all your other nodes or a series of nodes, it will always copy to node number 5, which for me is always shadows in this case, right? So it's consistent. The problem with not preserving node numbers is that if I created something after my normal node, that might be relabeled to label 5, right? And then you can't, like, to node 5 rather. So then you can't copy things effectively. So that's definitely something I was taking advantage of in this particular project. By the way, if you've got the project files, you will be able to gain access to this template by right-clicking in the gallery, clicking Import. You will have a DPX and DRX file. The DPX is just the image for the still. The DRX is the actual metadata of the node pipeline. So to import it, all you have to do is select the DPX, click Import, and the DRX will piggyback on it. So they will both arrive together. If you right-click, you can display node graph, and all of that data is still in there, and you can access it. Okay, where was I going with this? Yeah. A couple of tips. Oh, with the 5 seconds that I have remaining, yay. Let's see. So, sorry? Yes, oh, sorry, the fringing. Yes, I had that closer to the end, but let me show you the fringing anyway while we're here. Let's see, 13. So, make use of the template, middle click. So, let me turn off, highlight mode. With the blue, to add a bit of color to the sky, I'll first of all make sure that the blue selection looks good and the highlights, and it's a little bit aggressive, so I will introduce luminance as a factor so that I can exclude the treetops more effectively, like so. And in fact, I want to drag it a little bit further out because I'm going to be inversing this selection in a second. I can also check to see if saturation will improve the result, but no, it won't, so I'll keep it off. So now, with probably a window as well, because I don't want to impact the top of the house and the car. How do I activate it? There we go. There we go. We've excluded everything we don't need. And thankfully, this is a locked off shot, so I don't even have to track this. So looking at that sky in the waveform or the parades, I can dampen it using the gain to make it more like gray. Let me change my waveform to just luminance based so it's easier to tell. There we go, what's happening to the sky. The reason why I want to make it like gray before I make it blue is to do with latitude, right, in the chromaticity. So if you look at the waveform right now, right, the way it was, wow, that's big. Before I corrected it, it was pretty much compressed, right, against the white point at the top. So there's no latitude. There's nowhere for it to go up or down, which doesn't seem to matter, you know, when you're talking luminance. But if you're looking at color, it means a lot. Because if you push pixels up, you can only achieve more white. You know, like a pixel value of 1023, 1023, 1023 is pure white. You're not going to get it to be more blue. By pushing the gain down, all right, so that's our sky being dropped, I now have the ability to move and shuffle these parades up and down in relation to one another, and this is where you get color. So light gray is a pretty good starting point for introducing color into a pure white object or element. And yeah, now I could just pick up my gain and drag it towards a certain shade of blue. The selection, of course, is very, very rough, so I probably would want to put a bit more effort into the matte finesse before I continue. But not too much. That's the odd thing about working with low bit depth footage, is that you do want to sort of paint with broad strokes. You don't want to be too precise. So I'll just denoise as well, apply a bit of radius. And I won't be too dramatic with like my color change. I also think there's a bit of artifacting on the left, so I could have done a better job of making that selection, I think. There we go. But for the fringing, what I would do is I would send the blue matte signal to my fringe node. But instead of working on it directly, I would invert it. So you can do that in the key matte, invert it like so, but then come back to the qualifier and once again make a selection on the blue, but this time focusing on these chunky blue elements in the footage. Now, there's no like right or wrong way to remove fringing. There's actually a lot of approaches. You could do it with power windows, right? You can make selections. There's other methods. I suppose you could probably use magic windows, as magic mask to achieve it to a certain extent. But with this particular footage, because of the bit depth, that I had to take into account, I found this gave me the cleanest results, right? So now I'm pretty much just selecting the fringe by using the inverse of the blue section. And now I could just go into something like my saturation controls and dampen down the blue. All right, so it still looks a little bit rough from that initial blue selection. I'm going to see if I can further expand it. There we go, to kind of gel the two of them together. Blur radius, that's it. That's what was missing. All right, so let's see what happens without the fringe. It just needs a bit more cleanup, and then it'll be practically there. And that's before, and that's after. It's just a little bit darker than I'd want it to be, but it's kind of getting there. All right, anything else? All right, yeah, I'm getting that signal. Thank you, Dan. Okay. Dan, hypothetically, what if somebody raised their hand and said, "Hey, my question is, what else were you going to show us today?" Would that not going to fly? No, I kid, of course. It's Q&A time. Yes. Thank you.
Well done, Daria. Thank you. Let's get into some questions. Tom.
Thank you. I'm going to try and keep them quick. There are parts where you've got like burned in graphics like towards the beginning. So what do you do to work around that? Because if you're making mass changes, the color of the graphic might end up changing between shots. And then the second, which might be a quicker one, was when you were bringing it in using scene detection, is there a benefit to doing that so that you've got them as individual clips rather than just bringing it onto a timeline and doing the scene detection there, where it just keeps it as one clip but just chops it up? I'm not really sure what the benefit is of one over the other, I guess.
Okay, yeah, those are two very good questions. So yeah, actually the graphics was another point of conversation between me and the director. I actually like the graphics because they are an element of their time, so I wanted to maintain them as much as possible. There was a point where he wanted to replace them with new graphics, and I think someone else on his end ended up talking him out of it, which I was really pleased to hear. But at the very least, he really wanted to get rid of that red fringe. So that was just kind of similar to what I just did with the blue fringing. I had to eliminate and desaturate it, try to keep them as clean and white as possible. But then I would also just use like a yellow qualifier together with a power window to exclude them from the color correction. Yeah, because they would appear between shots, so you wanted them to be consistent. And the whole, the end of the film has rolling credits that were also in this style. So that was a lot of not a lot of correction, but once I developed the workflow, it worked okay. And then the second question was about why did I do it in the scene cut interface versus doing it on the timeline. If I'm being perfectly honest, I think it's just a matter of habit. That's how I initially used the tool, and I sort of continue to find it a comfortable place to see a comprehensive cut list, which I kind of refer to. But there's nothing wrong with doing it directly on the timeline. So yeah, you can do it that way and trim. Yes?
Daria, did you use Firewire to bring the files in, or were they already?
We aren't able to hear your question unless you speak into the mic.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The question was, did you use Firewire to bring the original files in, or was it already digital files that you were started with?
Yeah, so no, I didn't need to use a Firewire. It was digitized by a company in, I believe, in Los Angeles before I received the files.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's good.
Hi there. Thanks for a great presentation. as always. When I do selections or qualifications on 8-bit footage, I also always use 6-vector presets because I find it gives a cleaner result than if you do it manually with the qualifier. So is it using HSL, the 3D technique? You know, like in the qualifier, you can switch between the various options of doing the qualifications. Do you know?
I mean, wait, do you mean the 3D qualifier here?
Yeah, exactly. So the 6-vector presets always gives a cleaner result, I find, on 8-bit footage.
Well, the 6-vector presets only use the HSL qualifier, the regular one.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't make use of the 3D qualifier.
Okay.
I suppose you could just reconstruct make your own vector templates using the 3D qualifier. It's, yeah, I don't see why not.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, any other question? Yeah, back here.
So that technique you showed towards the end, dealing with that blue fringing around the trees, is that the same technique you'd use for any sort of chromatic aberration off of a lens, or like is there like another sort of approach?
There is another approach. This is more for fringing because it's like monochromatic, one of those words, mono something. But for chromatic aberration tends to be like dual chromatic, right? So what you probably want to use is, I believe it's the chromatic adaptation tool. And no, it's not. Hang on, I'm lying. Control Z, let me undo. Go on, I'll find it. But there is a tool specifically for reducing aperture diffraction. Chromatic aberration, I can hear Sherwin. There it is. Oh yeah, chromatic aberration removal. And what's great is that you can actually indicate what your edge colors are, and it covers every possible combination. So yeah, that's pretty good. And then you can combine that with like a power window, so in case you've got chromatic aberration on the edges, which is what often happens, then you can target on removing those and not just like a blanket application across the whole thing.
And that like works fine with like stuff that was shot interlace, basically. That particular OFX.
It works fine on what?
On interlace footage, like on what was shot there.
I'll be honest, I've not tried this on interlaced footage. I wouldn't have tried it on this because I just I don't feel like it's the same type of I don't think that what we're seeing is chromatic aberration because it's fringing as a result of, I think, the dynamic range like not being properly represented, because you're not seeing it anywhere else in the footage, right? We're not seeing just oh sorry, gosh, that's like really easy to hit for some reason. You're not seeing it like present anywhere else, so I just didn't feel the need for this tool.
All right, thanks so much.
Oh yeah.
So when it comes to matching archival footage, either with the color bars or to different cameras, I've seen some people for just camera matching in general, use like tetrahedral interpolation. That's a Colin-sized term. Sure. But to start matching, like just matching cameras that have like different color biases. So is that something that, because you use the hue versus hue and hue versus sat to initially match the color bars, would the tetra stuff actually help in that sense as well, or is that just another approach?
So when you say tetrahedral interpolation, you're talking about using it in the HSL curves?
More for like matching, so like where there's color shifts in the color bars, because you can with the tetra you can play red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow against red, green, and blue to kind of fix them in very broad strokes. Right. I was wondering if that was like another approach to potentially match old footage with other things.
No, I mean I'm afraid I've not tried or even heard of that. So it sounds fantastic, though. We could probably talk about it after the fact.
Yeah, we'll catch up.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. All right, back here.
Going back to your bars, when you started moving all the colors to line them up, it affects the I and the Q, and the I and the Q are respective to the U. So, but once you move that and the I and Q shift out, how do you pull those back in, or you just leave them the way they are?
So the I and Q, you're talking about
the old bars, because these were,
the skin tone. Let's see.
So if you look in the vectorscope, you'll see, when you lined up everything, those two little dots down at the bottom there, you see those are the I and the Q down there? Right, which you know. Sorry about that.
That's right.
When you
That's fine.
started moving everything in place, they shifted out of position. And so I'm just wondering, is there a way to move I and Q back, to their, what is it, a 90-degree, relationship?
Let's see. Hang on.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you just did like the same adjustment. I don't see. Yeah, why not? Just an HSL hue versus hue. Yeah, just rotate them back into place. Those 2 points.
Any other questions? Yep.
Just wondering about the color management for this.
Yes.
Like, was there anything special as far as like input, color space, what you use for that, for this kind of archival?
So I'm trying to, like, off the top of my head, I can't say if I remember what the standard was. I think it would have been probably sRGB as the input color space. And my working color space was Davinci Wide Gamut. Because we were doing 4K UHD deliverable, and again, I suspect that the director might want to take this elsewhere. Like, so far, we're only using it for submission to the university, and they actually have a projection system, so I had to take their specs into account for the deliverable, and then I also sent him like a YouTube version as well. But yeah, otherwise the working space was wide. All right. Anything else? How are we feeling? Good.
We've got time for one more. Yeah.
Clearly, everybody else in this room is way ahead of me. Based on the questions here, I have a noob question for you. Based on your node tree, how come some of yours were in parallel and some are in series? What is the benefit to having them parallel versus series, vice versa?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So for me, my decision to break up nodes, from serial to parallel, the treatment of the signal is actually very similar in parallel versus serial. So it's all about at what stage I want the video signal to be when I perform a certain change. So for example, working on highlights and shadows after normalization makes sense to me because at the normal stage, this is where I'll be unpacking the tonality, so to speak, right? So I'll be extending the highlights to about as high as I want them to go, and the shadows. And then within that defined range, that is when I want to start working on highlights and shadows. But I don't have a preference for which one I want to work on first. I just know that I want to work on both of them after normalization. And because they're such separate segments of the Luma waveform, I could have kept them linear. So in this particular instance, it's more just like an organizational, decision. And it's also just good visually to say, like, okay, these are quite strongly related in terms of their action. And the same thing happens like with the vectors as well. They're kind of all separate, but they're performing like an action on a similar stage, so to speak.
It's not like you change one setting and all four of them change at the same time. It's just, okay.
No, still, separate. They're like standard corrector nodes.
Organizational choice.
Yeah, in this case, yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Guys, give it up for Daria.
Thank you.
So wonderful. And so kind, even though I know where her family lives. I know, I'm horrible. Anyway, we're going to get into our break here and then get set up for our third and final presentation. We still have lots more stuff to give away. We will see you guys back here in a little bit. Thank you.
So we use Puget systems for all our computers here. And for us to be able to experiment, we need these powerful computers to be able to pull that off. When we think about future projects, we don't think about them from a hardware capability. Like virtual production running into Unreal Engine with real-time rendering, it's all just happening right there. And at this point now we're getting into artificial intelligence, deepfakes, image generation, audio processing. There's a whole bunch of crazy bits of technology, and it's working now because we work with Puget computers.
All right, everyone. Find your seats, please. I'm so excited to give you all stuff. Let's give away our announce our giveaways for our online winners here. Stephen Ormerod won a copy of Beat Edit. Congratulations. Compliments of Mammo World. Sebastian H won a ASUS Pro Art display. Let's go. That is so cool. So again, winners will be contacted via email after the event, and we'll have those companies drop ship those items to you or to your inbox. Pretty cool. Okay. Our in-person winners. Brian Ranikusen. Hey, that's you back there. What camera are you shooting on these days? What? Okay, well, you just got upgraded to a Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro. Thank you so much, Blackmagic, for that. And John Keeney? That's you? How would you like a NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3090 graphics card?
Wow.
Congratulations, man. Thanks for being here. Please don't tell me you use a Mac. Because I bet someone here would love to buy that from you. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And also, thank you so much to Blackmagic Design, ASUS, Mammo World, and of course, NVIDIA Studio for making those giveaways happen. We have a few more we're going to give away later today, so we still have more stuff, but I believe that is reserved for our in-person audience only. Also, just a quick message for our in-person audience. We want to make sure that you guys had easy access to the incredible Motion VFX plugin that was made for ResolveCon by Motion VFX. So you'll be getting an updated email that has the correct link in it. Sorry about that. My bad. I was too concerned thinking about if I actually knew where Daria's family lived or not. And I put in the wrong address. My bad. So anyway, you guys, we were at our last presentation of ResolveCon 2023. I can't believe it's such a surreal thing here, but like, it's happening. We're getting there. And then Battle Royale happening later. So this sponsored presentation comes from our friends at Puget Systems. My best bud, Casey Ferris.
Hey guys, so I'm gonna jump in because we have a lot of work to do here. I'm really excited to show you this. One of my favorite things is when somebody realizes something, they're like, wait a minute, I can do that? And hold on, like this thing that I've been wanting to make, it's actually possible with just the tools that I have right now. And I'm pretty sure that for some of you, maybe not all of you, but some of you, this is one of those things. And I was really excited to kind of come across this. So a bit of a story time. I know I just said I'm going to jump in, but I'm going to tell you a story first, actually. So, when I was a young warthog, very nice. Back in high school, I started watching this show that no one should watch called Aqua Teen Hunger Force. You guys ever watch that show? Okay, so as soon as I started getting into video, I was like, man, I wonder if I could make something like that someday, knowing nothing about animation or how that worked or anything. But I've kind of been like low-key on a mission to make something sort of like that and make it in a really, really fun way. And so a little while ago, I realized, I'm like, man, I think I could probably take a little bit of time and kind of learn how to do this, you know, and learn how to maybe use an animation program. So I started looking into all the animation programs, and this was also just right when I was getting super nerdy with Fusion too. And so I started looking into all these other animation programs that a bunch of cartoons use, and one is they're really expensive, some of them. They're really difficult to use, huge learning curve, and very, just not an ideal thing for at least the workflow that I'm used to. But I started to notice that a lot of the things that these animation programs do, you could do in Fusion maybe. Maybe you could do that in Fusion. And I started thinking about it more, and I'm like, actually, you could do nearly all of that in Fusion if you set it up right. And so I want to show you guys just some research that I've been doing. I call it research because it's very scientific. And my wife says, you're just messing around making cartoons with your friends. And I'm like, yes, but it's scientific. So I've been scientifically researching this, and I'm going to show you now. I'm going to preface this. Your mind's going to be blown by the quality of this cartoon, because yes, I did make it in my hotel room, but I want to show you a much better cartoon in a couple weeks. We have something I want to show you, but I want to show you something that's really easy to put together. So something kind of like this. This is just a little cute little guy, and you know, he says hello. So that's kind of cool, right? So this, believe it or not, was animated in Fusion. It was rigged in Fusion, but it was also drawn in Fusion. So like all of the drawing tools and everything were used. This was all used all inside of Fusion and made in Resolve and everything. Now, again, this isn't like the most huge masterpiece, but you can see the potential here, right? You can see where we're going with this. This is a really cool way of creating art inside of Fusion and then making it into an animation rig that lives on your timeline. And you can just select the controls here in the inspector, and you can move things around here because it's like a little puppet. And you can do your keyframing and everything right there in the edit page. And what's neat is you don't have to go into another program, you don't have to round trip or anything like that. And if you do it right, it's very quick. It's a really cool way to do it. So I want to give you guys just a taste of what kind of goes into this, because animation, even an animation workflow that's pretty well dialed in and has all kinds of different little shortcuts and everything like we've been developing, it still takes forever. It still takes so long because it's animation. But I want to show you just a little bit of it, okay? So I want to first talk about how we draw in Fusion. And this, I get really excited about this. So if you want to, you can follow along. All you have to do is just open up a new project. And I'm just going to go into the edit page. I'm wondering why my thing isn't working here, because I want to show you what's happening. Oh, it is? What's going on then? Give me just a second, because we'll need to do lots of zooming in. Let's just see if we can make this work here. Yeah, that should work. What's happening there? Okay. Doesn't work now though. Cool. Okay. Well, we don't get to zoom in. I'm sorry. So let's go into the media pool and just make a new Fusion composition. Right click, say new Fusion composition, hit create. This is going to help if you know Fusion. Even if you don't and you're kind of new to Fusion, maybe you drag a couple of those nodes down there and just see what's possible. So when we make a new Fusion composition, we just have this media out. And anything that we connect to that is just going to be on the screen. So I'm going to switch my controls here back to normal. And the first thing I want to do is just grab a background and drag that in and connect that to media out. So we have a black screen. Now, I have the goal of creating a cartoon character to eventually make a cartoon rig out of. And so I need some way to be able to draw. Now, typically, this is done in design programs of some kind, and you can export them in layers and stuff, and you can bring them into your animation program. But we're just going to draw this right into Fusion, and then we can kind of animate the nodes this way. So one way that we can make a custom shape is we can just grab a background. That's going to give us our color. Let's just make this like green or, I don't know, bluish, okay? And then we can grab a mask, like a polygon mask, just drag that in there and connect it to the background. Now the background disappears, but if we click and drag here, we can create a shape. Cool? Pretty exciting stuff. So yeah, I guess we could do Q&A now. So this is cool. This is real basic. And actually, this is very handy because this is essentially a way to draw a vector shape inside of Fusion. And you know, even just with this little tiny way of doing things, I mean, you could draw a whole bunch of shapes and make a whole big background. I mean, this background that we made that I know is pretty stunning. Pretty good. This is just made this way. It's just masked shapes, right? But what I'd like to do is there's a couple ways that you can just make your own tools in Fusion. We've looked at how to make macros and stuff, and so those are things that you can grab out of Fusion and put into the edit page, which we will be doing in a little bit. But there's a lot of value here in just being able to kind of make your own tool inside of Fusion. And so again, this is really, really basic. I'm just gonna get rid of all of our points here. So I just have a blank polygon and a background. Select both of those, right click, and then go to macro, create macro. That'll bring up the macro tool, which is big and scary. But all we do is check what we want to be able to show up in the inspector. But we're not really thinking about the edit page. We're thinking about if this were a brand new node in Fusion that was like a combination node that did all the cool stuff that this tree of nodes does, but in one little package, what kind of controls would we want for this new tool we're making? One thing I'd like is I'd like to be able to change the color. So under background 1, I can twirl up image just so it brings up this color thing. And I'll select color. But to actually have this color picker come up, you have to say color, green, blue, and alpha for top left, like that. Okay, so those 4. That'll actually bring up the color picker and stuff. So, and then we'll just twirl up background. That sounds great. And then this, I didn't actually know this until somewhat recently, because I've only kind of recently gotten into macros and stuff. But polygon 1, if we twirl that down and go down under controls, there's a control called polyline. And if you check that, that will let you make your own shape on this new tool that we're making. So if we do that, just click that, and then we'll call this, let's call this cartoon underscore flat. Let's just go with that. And then I'll click these 3 dots up here and say save. And by default, it's just going to open up my macros directory. And the great thing is, this is exactly where I want it. Oh, so good. I'll just hit enter. Perfect. I can close this. So now I can get this trash out of here. And I can hit shift spacebar, and I can search for tools. And so I'll type in cartoon, and that brings up our tool cartoon flat. And I can hit enter. And now we have one node that I can select, put into our media out. And now just by selecting the node and starting to draw, I have a shape that's filled with a custom color. Okay? I think that in itself is actually pretty cool. It saves a lot of time. You don't have to have 2 nodes. You have 1. You're doubling your productivity, baby. That's pretty cool. But I looked at that and I went, okay, that's really neat. But a lot of cartoons have a stroke around it, and a lot of this kind of art style has a stroke. So how would I do that? Well, let's actually go back a little bit here. I shouldn't have deleted that. Don't ever delete anything. But let's go back to our polygon over our background. Let's go ahead and rename some stuff. We'll just call this color for this background, and we're going to rename polygon. I'm just hitting F2 to rename stuff. We'll call this shape. Okay? Shape and color. Now, if we want to make a stroke around this, this shape, I'll actually give us a shape so we can see what's going on. We could do that a few different ways, but I think what I'll do is just grab another background, drag this in, and I'm going to merge this background over our color. And that's going to give us a black screen because we're taking a black background and just putting it over. Okay? But we can reuse this shape mask. I can just plug this into the background, and then we'll have that same shape being applied to the black color, and that's laid right over the blue color, which isn't really what we want. It's kind of halfway to what we want. So actually, instead of reusing this polygon, I'm going to copy this polygon, Control-C, and then double-click off of this and hit Control-Shift-V, and that's going to make an instance. So an instance is like a copy of a node, and it has linked controls. And so if I change this mask here in this instance shape, it's also changed here on the left, on our regular shape, okay? So by default, everything is linked. But if I select this instance shape, I could right-click on something like border width and then de-instance it. I could right-click on something like solid and de-instance that. And then if I uncheck solid, and let's see what's going on here. Oh, I don't have this connected. Bloop. And then if I push up the border width, look what happens. We have a stroke around our stuff here. And then I can grab this and move it around, and that's going to move both of those masks at the same time, which is looking a lot like a shape with a stroke around it, huh? That's pretty cool. So again, we could select this, and we could make this into our own drawing tool. Like, this is where my mind started to get blown a little bit, because I'm like, okay, yes, I could use it for this. And it's like when you discover that a tool could work and you're like, okay, yeah, I could do it that way. That seems good. But then you're like, wait a minute, I can make my own drawing tools. And then like I showed the guys, I showed Dan and Sam that we were in the hotel at Las Vegas, and I'm like, hey, check this out. And they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. What with that? And I'm like, I made that. And they're like, what do you mean you made that? I'm like, I made that tool. I can make it do anything. And they're just like, wait, what? You know, and they're just like, Dan just like laid down for a while. It was pretty funny. It was pretty funny. And so I'm like, okay, what's next then? All right, well, okay, let's just hold up. Let's just back up a minute, okay? How many people are like traditional artists, like have drawn stuff before? Or like, okay, so do you guys know the egg thing where like you're teaching how to do shading and they make you draw an egg, right? So so you generally draw a shape like that. Well, it's not like this. This is a diamond. I know shapes, okay? I'm really good at shapes. But here's the thing. If you draw a diamond with this, you select all of the points and you hit Shift S, it's an egg. Okay? That one's free. That one's free. Anyway, so let's say I draw this egg, right? To make this look like it has any dimension, I mean, yeah, it's 2D, it looks cool, but to make it like really go, bam, you know, to make it pop a little bit, we want to add a little bit of shading to kind of give it some roundness, right? So, doing my scientific research, I looked into how you do this in various programs, and some of them, you know, if you're just drawing it, you'd kind of paint in that shade. Some of them you can make a new shape and you could mask it with this shape, and it goes on and on and on. Basically, it ranges from kind of annoying to a ton of work. So I was thinking, why is this so hard to just shade something? I feel like I'm gonna have to shade about 11 billion things if I'm gonna use this as like my main drawing tool for a cartoon. So I'm like, okay, well, one thing we could do is we could just take like a background and we could put this over our egg here. And I could take this shape mask and limit that here. And then I could mask that like this, right? And so then I could have, you know, a shade that goes on like that. That could work. And then I could take this merge, you know, and I could blend it down, that kind of thing. And that would work. That'd be cool. But that's like 3 nodes. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know about that. What if we did something like a color corrector? Because, I mean, really, a shade of something is just mean that it has less light, and you know that's one of the really cool tools in Fusion that you don't really have in a lot of other animation drawing programs necessarily. You don't have a color corrector. Sometimes you can add a filter or something, but like Fusion does this all day. And so if I grab this color corrector, one thing I'm going to do is go over to Options and make sure I have Pre-Divide, Post-Multiply on. If you don't know why, I'll tell you later. Basically, it makes sure that it listens to the alpha channel, and that nothing crazy is going to happen if we color correct this. So now we could do something like take this gain down, but not only can we take the gain down, but we could probably even push this a little bit cooler. It's always nice to have a little bit cool shadows if you're going to make something kind of stylistic like this. And then we could just add a mask to that, like this, and now we have this shade on our egg, right? Of course, I did just such a good job. So good. But we have that shady part of our egg. And what's neat about this is I don't have to go in and change the color and all that stuff. I just go to our color here, and this is going to change depending on what color I have, and it's going to look pretty good. It'll look pretty good. It's kind of like an automatic way to shade something. So that's pretty neat. And so let's rename this. Let's call this shade _CC, so I remember it's a color corrector node. And let's do a similar thing. Let's say I want to do like a highlight. Okay, I'm going to do kind of the same thing. Just grab another color corrector like this, and make sure to take Pre-Divide, Post-Multiply in my options here. But this time, we're going to gain it up a little bit, maybe desaturate it a touch, maybe make it a little warmer, something like that. And then again, maybe we'll just add a little highlight to this. Boop, like that. And that highlight's only going to happen within that mask. So we're thinking like, okay, this is how I could maybe draw this egg right here. It's a green egg apparently. I don't know how eggs work, okay? But what's neat is later I'll show you how we can kind of make custom masks and kind of have this tool accept any kind of mask so that you can really quickly draw and shade and highlight things without having to remask things or trace things out. If you've ever seen art tutorials in a popular layer-based image editing software, you might see people selecting under the stroke and then drawing it in and selecting, and like half their work is selecting stuff. We don't need to do that. We can automatically do that, which is pretty neat. Okay, so I think we're almost done with our drawing tool. It looks pretty good. I feel like we could draw a lot of stuff here, but let's say this was an eyeball or something. So instead of an egg, this is like a little eyeball, all right? And it's kind of a wobbly eyeball, but it's all right. I'll make this kind of more of a white color. I'll just go to my color and kind of, oh, my mouse is freaking out. We'll make it like almost white, like that. Because an eyeball, it has the white part, and then in a cartoon character, it has a black circle, right? So we could put a circle in that. We could do that a bunch of different ways. One thing we could do is we could just merge it over. And actually, we could use one of these tools we already made, Cartoon Flat. Cool. We could merge this over it, like this. And I'll just, again, do my crazy diamond thing, like this. Select it, Shift S. And we'll make this kind of dark like that. So here's our kind of wobbly eyeball. And now we have an eyeball that looks back and forth, right? But look what happens when we move it out here. And if this is a different color or the stroke is a different color, then it's obviously like, there's something weird here. So what we want to do is contain that to the shape. So what we can do is just merge this, first of all, under our stroke, like this, and so that when this moves back and forth, it goes under the stroke. That's halfway there, because we don't want this to colorize the stroke. We just want it to be kind of inside of the shape. And then we can use this same shape that we're masking everything with and mask that merge, like this. And now we have an interior thing that's moving around, and it's just inside of that. That in itself is like kind of a big deal with the animation programs. There's a lot of different ways that are honestly very complicated and annoying to make that happen. But I was like, dude, I can hook that up in Fusion in like 2 seconds. And so we're getting to the point where this is actually pretty cool. So I'm like, all right, we have this. Let's do a little bit of testing and make sure everything's gonna be okay here. So let's say I don't want to put my highlight on, and I'll just get rid of my If I get rid of this mask, look what happens. It makes everything brighter. So that's a problem. And the thing is, when you're making a tool for yourself or you're making a template or something, you have to kind of design to have it not break and be annoying. And there's a lot of ways to do this, but one kind of little tricky way that I found to make this happen is I can just take another background, and I'm going to put this into the mask of my color corrector, okay? And what that's going to do is it's going to use this. I'm just bringing up the background, and I'll hit A for our alpha channel. It's using that alpha channel, that transparency, to tell the color corrector where to color correct stuff. And it's the entire screen. So it says color correct everything, which isn't what we want still. But if we go into our color corrector, we can go over to our settings here, and we can tell it to invert the mask, whatever mask we connect to this. So we'll say invert. And now, since we don't have a mask connected to this background, it is not showing up. It's not doing the color correction. So basically, if we don't hook up a mask to this, it's not going to do anything, which is what we want, right? If we're not going to intentionally tell it where to highlight stuff, we don't want it doing its job. We want it to leave it alone, okay? So what happens if we take this ellipse and we plug that into the background? Well, it's almost doing what it's supposed to do. It's highlighting everywhere except that mask. And we can actually fix that with the same thing. If we select background 2, go to settings, and apply mask inverted, we're getting that same result that we were doing, but when we get rid of this ellipse, it just disappears. Okay. I had been hooking this up with if expressions in misery. You don't need to do that. You can just do this little simple thing, which is really nice. And so let's just call this, let's rename this background. Let's call this highlight mask input, okay? Because that's what we're really going to use this for. And I'll hold shift and just drag this other polygon out, copy and paste this, same thing, connect this here, rename it, shade, mask, input, okay? Make sure to flip this shade, color correction, mask like that. And this should do the same thing. So if I take this ellipse and plug that in, oh, why isn't it doing it? Oh, it's because I don't have this on the mask. That'll do it. Yeah. Okay. So now it only shades things within that mask. If I have it hooked up, doesn't do anything if I don't have it hooked up. Okay. Great. All right. I'm also going to kind of get this ready to start just like making our tool. So I'm going to get rid of our shape here. I'm going to basically get rid of all my shapes. So cartoon flat, take my shape and just get rid of all of the points here. So again, I have a blank canvas, but it's ready to be drawn on. And I have everything set up here in kind of this little, I don't know, this little factory that will make this shape based on what I draw. Okay? This is where it starts to get really cool. If we select all of these, and actually, if you select these in a certain order, you can kind of stack the order in the inspector. And so maybe we do like shape, and then color, and then let's do the instance shape, and then this background, which we're going to remember is the stroke color. I should definitely have renamed that, but I'm not going to do it. And then we can do the shade CC, the color corrector, which we'll remember is the highlight. And then we can probably do the rest of them, and that's fine. Okay? Even if you don't do it the exact order I do, you can just select it all, and it'll just be in a little different order. It's not that big a deal. Okay? We got to select all of these, right-click anywhere, go to macro, and create macro. Now this is where we can select what we want to be available in that new major awesome node that we're going to use to draw everything. So we want to make sure that we have the shape available. So we're going to publish polyline like that. We're going to go down to color and make sure that we have the main color, which is just color, green, blue, alpha. We're going to go to instance shape, which is our stroke mask, and make sure we have border width so that we can adjust the width of the border. And we're going to go to background 1, which is our border color, and we're going to select that. And this time we're going to rename this color and just say stroke color. Cool. Shade CC. So this is the color corrector for our shade. We can, again, publish anything that we want to be able to adjust. And so maybe we'll do saturation 1, which is just the master saturation there. And then let's do master RGB gain. And we'll call this, let's see, was this shade? This is shade, right? Yeah, shade. So we can do, so shade gain. And we'll do shade saturation up here. Okay. And then color corrector, this is our highlight. Again, I should have renamed that. Why make it so hard? Saturation 1, we'll call this highlight saturation. The jury's out on how to spell highlight, in my opinion. I don't care if there's a right way, it's out. The jury's out in my mind, okay? Maybe I'll spell it 10 different ways in the same macro because I just want to watch the world burn. Okay, so we have the shade and the highlight. Now we have the shade and mask inputs. So this is really cool. So what we can do is we can actually, the first part here, we have the inputs for the nodes. And so for this shade mask input, we can select effect mask, and that will publish a little triangle that we can connect things to on our new node here, and we can use a external mask. So we can just call this shade mask. Oh, and you're gonna love the magic. Okay, shade mask, and then highlight mask, same thing. So instead of effect mask, we'll call this highlight mask. Great. And I'll also do a couple other little things here. Merge to. This is where we put our internal shape, our little like eyeball, black part of the eyeball. Again, should have renamed it. But we can publish the foreground like this, and we'll just call this internal shape. Or just internal. And then merge one, that puts our stroke over our like flat color. And so sometimes if you're drawing like the limb of somebody, you might want it to attach to their arm, to their shoulder or something, and you don't want a stroke between their arm and their shoulder. And so if we publish the mask for merge one, like this, which is the merge for our stroke, we can just say stroke mask. We can decide where it draws that stroke if we want to, just giving us options, right? So that's a lot of stuff. Let's call this something awesome. How about cartoon shape 1? Yes, so awesome. And we're gonna hit save and close. Okay, we'll just move this up. Yeah, we'll grab the media out. We'll just move this up. It's not gonna hurt anything. Now, shift spacebar, cartoon shape 1. Look at this little buddy. Look at this little buddy we got going on. I'm gonna go ahead and plug this in. And now we just have to select the shape and we'll start to draw. And we have our shape with our stroke. We can change the color. And if we want to quickly do some shading on it, I can grab a polygon, right click off of this, and then I get a nice little menu. I have a little menu of all the things that I can connect this to. The internal shape, the shade mask, highlight mask, or stroke mask. So we'll do shade mask. And we'll just kind of do a little bit of shading here, and I can be cavalier about the rest of it. Boom, now there's shade. Can do this, same thing for highlight. Boom, highlight, now I can draw a little highlight there. If I want something inside of it, again, I can do something like a flat, right? And put this in on the internal, and I can draw something, and that's gonna stay inside of it, but under the stroke, right? So we're building all of that stuff so that we can make it happen. If I want to get rid of the stroke somewhere, I can take another mask, plug this into the stroke mask, and I can choose where I want the stroke to be or not be. So this is essentially a very, very robust way to draw vector-ish art here in Fusion. Let's draw something. Let's draw something with this thing we made. So, okay, I'm gonna draw a friend for our cartoon bear, right? Remember this guy? He needs a friend. He does. So let's draw him a little friend. Everybody needs a friend. I'll just make a new Fusion composition and we'll call this friend. And let's go here. So I might have time to like draw like part of it, but I'll show you the end result too, okay? So let's do cartoon shape 1, and this is gonna be his body. So I'm gonna select that, and we'll rename this, and we'll call this body. And we'll just kind of do like a little, I don't know, like a little nubbin shape like this. Cool, there's his like little body, right? And so, yeah, we'll make him a little taller. We'll use our little Shift S kind of thing. And then we'll make him blue. He's gonna be a blue bear, all right? See, this is so fun. Like, it's like, it was all like super intense, and now it's just like, we're just drawing cartoons, man. Like, it just gets, it gets less intense real quick when you're making cartoons. So it's like, all right, cool. So there's his body, and there's little nubbins for feets, okay? There's little feet nubbins. And we can change the stroke color. Something I like to do is grab the stroke, the actual fill color, and just make this kind of a shade of that. It just kind of looks a little bit nicer to me. So now we have this stroke. We can decide how big of stroke we want, like this. Very nice, okay? Now, let's draw an eye, which we have a little bit of experience with. Let's draw his ear first. Let's draw his ear. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste this body, and I'll put this over itself. Select all of this and get rid of it, and I'll do my diamond trick like this. Select it, Shift S, and now we have a little ear for him. And now this is where like you start to appreciate this tool, because you're like, well, I need like the pink part of his ear. Do I have to make a background and merge it over, and then I have to like make sure everything's right? It's like, no, all you have to do is you can use Cartoon Flat and connect it to the already existing merge inside of that shape, and just draw right here like this, Shift S like that. And then let's make this color, let's do like more of a pink like that. And there's this little ear. We forgot to shade his body, so maybe we'll just add a little bit of shade here. And yeah, we'll kind of make a nice little thing like this. Okay. That'll add some shade to that side right there. Okay. So now we have his ear, and this is where it gets like really cool with Fusion, because like, yes, you could draw this in another program, and you're like, why would I do this in Fusion? This is why you do this in Fusion. Okay. So I can take this ear, and I need to duplicate that ear and flip it. So to do that, normally you would like copy and paste the layer, you would, redraw it, you do whatever you want. But in Fusion, we can draw things in a modular way. So it's kind of like if you put things through a series of filters, it changes its appearance. So we can kind of think about it that way, and just grab something like a transform node. And let's just, let's rename this ear so we don't get confused. And we'll bring this up on the left. So there's our ear. But if we take this and bring it into our transform, I'll put our transform here on the right. We can flip this with our transform like that. And then just merge this over where we had it before. I hit 2 on the keyboard, and now we have 2 ears, right? We don't have to redraw it or anything like that. I can offset this however we want, okay? I really want these ears actually kind of behind his body, and so let's just grab this, this body, and I'll hold Shift and just kind of drag this down, and we'll put the body over this and get rid of this merge real quick. There we go. To kind of like redo a couple things, but yeah, there's his ears behind his body, okay? And now, here's what's really cool about this. If I want to set up an animation for his ears to move, I could do something like make another transform node here. And I can select this transform node, and there's a pivot in each transform node like this. You kind of move this around. Let's actually look at this on the left. There's a little pivot that you can move around, and that's where it rotates from. And so I can decide where this rotates from, and I can rotate this, and look what happens to both of his ears. Isn't that cool? And so you can kind of build this in little pieces, and as they stack, then it makes your life a little bit easier. And you can also have these be individual controls and everything, but you can set up a transform to be something like the ear control. We'll just say CTRL_ear, and we know that that's something that we want to publish later when we make this into a rig, all right? We could do a similar thing for his eye, and same thing, so we'll do like cartoon shape 1, and again, we'll just draw a little kind of box here, Shift S with all of those selected, and there's an eye, and we'll just take this border width down a little bit, or we can take it totally off, whatever we want to do. And then again, if we want that, kind of flat look, or that little flat internal eyeball thing, can do this, Shift S, and make this dark like that. Then again, if we move this around, it's going to be inside of that eyeball. Really cool. Let's go ahead and make a transform after that. We take this transform and move that back and forth, and that's kind of our new handle for our eyes. Again, we could publish that center if we want to. And then we could take this and kind of do the same thing. We could just make a transform node, put this over here like this, merge it over, and we'll just kind of move this to the side, and now we have 2 eyes. And yeah, now we can look around, and it gets it gets pretty quick. Like once you realize like, oh, I don't need to duplicate things, I can kind of reuse things over and over again because you can put nodes into multiple different places, which is an advantage for Fusion that I haven't seen in a lot of other programs that are designed more for animation. Kind of cool. So anyway, I could keep drawing on this guy, but I already drew one. So I want to show you a little bit on how we would export this. One thing I want to show you is that for this ear control, when you move these ears back and forth, there's a point where you're like, yeah, that's great, that looks good. But after that, you're like, I'm not actually going to use this. He looks real awkward when I do that. Let's not go that far. So I don't want to go farther than maybe like 60-ish, minus 60 on that angle. And then over here, yeah, we're not going to go past there, so like 40. So the range is like negative 60 to 40 or so. But this angle, if I push this back and forth, he can just have a party. Okay? That's not what we want. So what we can do, and the guys showed this during their workshop actually the other day, but if you right-click on this, this tool in the inspector, you can go over to Edit Controls. And this is really neat. If you go down to ID right here, you can pick whatever control exists in the inspector already. So let's just find angle, which is somewhere. Probably angle. It's almost there. There it is. Okay. And you can set your range for something like a slider. So this this control right here is called a screw control, and you can just go around as many times as you want. But if you set it to a slider, and you make this range, what was it? Negative 60 to 40, negative 60 to 40, like that. And I'll make sure this is on the controls page and hit OK. What that does is it turns this angle into a limited control. And so when you publish this to the edit page and you give it to somebody who doesn't know how Fusion works and really loves breaking things, they can just go crazy. And no matter what they do at both extremes, it looks pretty good, right? And it's just a little bit easier, a little less touchy, that kind of thing. And so you can build a whole animation rig this way. And what's really neat is once you export it like this, so you can right-click, export it as a macro, just like you would a title, just like you would graphics in, just like if you were going to make like a graphics file or whatever. You can do the same thing, and just all you do is just select your controls. And so I'm going to, so control ears, we're going to pick angle, and we can call this, ears, and go through and you can select anything that you need to export. So I have eyes, but I didn't rename them. Anyway, so you go through and rename them. And that's how you would build your animation rig, and you can just kind of start to build all of these things. And any control that you want, you can just export with that macro thing. So that's pretty neat. So once you do that, you can combine an entire scene, an entire character. You can make a macro for each of your characters in your scene or in your series. You can draw all of your backgrounds. You can do all this stuff, and it's all natively in Fusion. And you can put that all in one DRFX file. And if somebody needs to help you animate, you can email them that DRFX file because it's really, really, really small. And they have like all of the assets for your animated project. Isn't that crazy? Like, what a cool thing. So, and there is a little bit of an art to optimizing these things because, Fusion is a pretty power hungry program. And so there is that side of things, and there are ways to make things run a little faster and that kind of thing. So we did have to do a lot of experiments on that, kind of going through that. So if you have questions on that, let me know. But the idea is pretty cool, and we've been having a lot of fun with it. And so really the idea here is that once we have a friend, we can go into, once we've installed this as a generator, we can just go into our generators and scroll down, and here's our bear. So this is just a similar one that I made. We can drag this in here like this. And then we can grab like our just transform settings, and we can adjust where he goes. And we can animate him and all the things that he can do here in the edit page, and adjust his ears and his eyes and his arms. And so, if he wants to see no evil, that's totally fine. All of that stuff. And like, it's not lost on me that these aren't like the most amazing characters ever, but you see the potential, right? Like it's pretty amazing. So I've been really excited to dive into this. I hope it's been interesting to you guys too. Thanks.
Man. So cool, so cool. All right, let's move into our Q&A time with Casey. Let's do it.
If you were to hand draw something, okay. Can you hand draw something and then trace on top of it? Are you able to see what's underneath?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, like that's how we've been making a lot of characters and stuff. Dan is an amazing artist. I don't know if you guys know, but he can just draw stuff on like Procreate or whatever. And so what we've been doing is taking his Procreate stuff and then tracing it in Fusion in this way. And so I mean, you can just bring it in like. Let me just do this. So I mean, I already drew this in Fusion, but you can pretend that this is just any image. You can do that and then just merge. You can just merge that over or under or whatever you're doing, and you just kind of lay it on top like that, and then you can do something like, cartoon shape like this, and then you can trace it, right? You can even bring it up in the other viewer, and you can trace it without even merging it. So I mean, I could take this like this and do one like this, and then bring up, let's say, and then I can grab my cartoon shape, and I don't even have to be looking at the cartoon shape. I can make my trace over here, because I don't even have to have the cartoon shape connected to be able to see where the path is. And then it's like once I have that going, then I can just connect this to whatever I'm doing, and it's actually there. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Any other questions? My God. Oh, right.
Now, it looks like with what you currently have, the macros you have set, like the arms and the eyes are working together. Is there a way to make it like arm independently, eye independently?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It just depends on how you connect it. That's the cool thing. That's the cool thing and the scary thing is that you can really do anything you want. So I mean, even this. Okay, so this rig right here, these arms are separate, right? And so I basically for the blue one I made it just like the ears where they're both connected. They're just mirrored basically. But you can do any number of different appendages and have them have individual controls and stuff for sure.
So I noticed on the polygon mask there's a roto assist tool. Does that help with tracing at all? I haven't used that tool personally, but is there something I can help with tracing?
Yeah, that does help. It kind of depends on what you're doing. If you have something that's high contrast, you might be able to work with that. I don't have a lot of experience with it, and with this kind of art, it doesn't need to be like super exact when you're tracing something. You're kind of just trying to get the feeling of it. So I haven't dove into that very much. So you might ask around. I wonder if the other Fusion guys have kind of worked with that a little more.
All right, I see you.
So now you built this out and you want to apply this to a soundtrack and you want it to program the mouth movements and reactions.
Yeah.
How would you do that?
Yeah. So you can what we've done is, I thought I built it into this, but maybe it was another earlier version of it. You can draw all the mouth shapes in a series, and so you just basically animate the mask for the mouth shapes, and then so you can I can just show you real quick. It doesn't take but a few seconds. So like let's say this is your mouth, and we'll just do something like, I don't know, it's like a triangle, right? So this is your mouth, and then you can go one frame to the right, and let's say that's like an O shape, and then the next frame is, whatever other shape, right? So we get the idea. So you have all of your mouth shapes, because that's kind of how it works is, if you guys don't know, they just have several, this kind of animation, you have several different mouth shapes, and you just match the mouth shape to the phoneme that they're saying at the moment. And so now if I go back and forth between the frames here, we have the different mouth shapes. And we can do this and hook this up to something like time speed. And if I set speed to 0, And if I set interpolation to nearest, then I can adjust the delay. And as I go in between these shapes, I can select that shape. And I can make this into a slider and have it limited to however many shapes I have. So we had 9 shapes working on a project that definitely is coming out at some point.
Definitely.
And then you just animate that slider. And that's actually how a lot of, that's basically the same way that most animation programs do it as well. So pretty cool.
But is that tied to a wave?
You can tie, so Reactor, there is a, there's an audio, it's like a driver of keyframes with audio.
Can you repeat the question, Casey?
Sorry, yeah, the question was, can you drive this with like a wave file? And you can't like automate it like an automatic lip sync. There isn't a way to do that really well within Fusion. We actually used a separate thing to help with that a little bit. But you can kind of do like a puppet mouth that is open when it's loud and closed when it's quiet. And you can drive that with a audio plugin from Reactor, which basically just, yeah, when it's loud, it's at 1, and when it's quiet, it's at 0. And then you hook that to like the Y scale, and it just kind of does that. And that works pretty darn well for a lot of stuff, actually.
I feel like I've got to ask a question every time here. So on your shadows, is it possible to convert it from a solid color to a gradient and warp the gradient so that it curves with your shape, so that it's not just a straight line gradient, but it's actually more
What you
variated?
might do is just soften the mask. Because you can soften that mask when you're drawing it. I'll show you. So let's see. This guy. So this is my my notes for this guy. So here for our body. So this is the shade for our body. If we just soften that edge, we can make that. Yeah. So I mean, you can get really detailed with it. And again, I mean, the sky's the limit because you're making your own tool here. So I mean, you can make it, you know, be a 4-color gradient, and you know, be driven by, you know, the red channel, and I mean, you could just go insane with this stuff, which is a temptation. Yeah.
If you want to stretch and squash your character to move around, would you put a transform at the very end, or how would you do that?
You could. It depends on what you want to do. If you just want one part to squash, you could do it earlier in the tree. But yeah, you could do something like a warper node towards the end to kind of like squish them up and down. And I haven't played with that a whole lot. I've kind of tested it a little bit, and it works. It's fun. Yeah.
All right, we have a question from their YouTube comments. It says, can you draw in Fusion? Because I know there is a draw tool. But I think what they're trying to ask is, like, is the drawing tool different than the style you're showing us here using the pen?
So I mean, there's a paint tool, which will let you, you know, if you have like a pen display, you can draw. And yes, you can do stuff like that. I wouldn't say it's, in my experience, real optimized for that. That's more like if you want to clone something out kind of thing. You can get it to work and make like a hand-drawn animation. I haven't, like, I dove deep enough into that to go, I don't know if this is real practical, and then I backed out. So there might be a really fancy way to do it, but I haven't come across it.
Okay, any more questions here? Okay, I have no other online questions being fed to me, so I guess.
All right. Must have been clear as mud.
We'll wrap it up. Thank you, Casey.
You're welcome.
Well, friends, like they say, all good things come to an end. Casey, you can stay up here, actually. So we're gonna say bye to everybody on stream.
Sorry, I was sneaking off. I'm sorry.
But yeah, you guys, this is the end of our online time for ResolveCon 2023. It is a privilege and an honor to be amongst such wonderful people, such wonderful creatives. It's been so much fun to see people's presentations, to hear all their expertise, their wisdom, their their insight into this amazing tool that is given away for free, which is really neat, pretty amazing.
Pretty awesome.
And to give away stuff. I love giving people stuff so much, you guys. It is one of my favorite things to do.
It's awesome, man.
But none of this would have been possible without the support given to us by our incredible, generous sponsors, Blackmagic Design, Puget Systems, Motion VFX, NVIDIA Studio, ASUS Audio, Mammo World Audio Design Desk, Action VFX, and Nope Omniscope. Thank you all for making this happen. Is there anything you want to say before we go?
Yeah, big thanks to everybody who's watching online. Obviously, this wouldn't happen without you guys, and really thankful for this opportunity. This is wild to have an event like this, and I want you guys to come out to the next one. So start planning now. We don't know when it's happening, if it's happening, or anything like that, but we'll tell you. We'll tell you soon, and I want you to put it on your calendar as soon as we know. Okay?
That's right.
Yeah.
I want to do a special thank you and shout out to Gadali over here in chat.
Yeah, Gadali.
And thank you so much, MPI, our stream moderation team. Thank you so much to the presenters, to the ground control crew. Thank you so much for making this all come together. Randy, I see you over there. Nothing would sound this good if you didn't help. So thank you, Randy.
Randy's the man.
So thank you all. We'll see you next year. Adios. All right, for everyone else, we're going to break for lunch, and we're back for the Davinci Resolve Battle Royale. See you guys then. Bye.